Single mom helps a lost tourist without knowing he's a millionaire who'd never let her go. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The noise of the busy diner faded into the background as Ellie Morgan wiped down the countertop for what felt like the 100th time that day. Her fingers were chapped from the harsh cleaning chemicals and her lower back ached from the double shift she'd pulled. A quick glance at the clock told her it was nearly midnight. Just 30 more minutes, and she could finally go home to her sleeping daughter. "Order up, Ellie!" Frank, the cook, called from the kitchen, sliding 2 plates of late-night breakfast specials onto the counter. "Thanks, Frank," she replied, mustering a smile despite her exhaustion. She balanced the plates expertly on her forearm, a skill perfected over 8 years of waitressing at Sandy's Diner, the only 24-hour establishment in the small coastal town of Harborview. The bell above the entrance door jingled, and Ellie suppressed a groan. Another customer meant she'd likely be stuck past her shift again. She delivered the breakfast plates to a pair of truckers before turning to greet the newcomer. The man who had entered looked wildly out of place. Tall and lean, with dark hair disheveled by the coastal wind, he wore what appeared to be an expensive suit, now rumpled and stained with what looked like mud on one knee. His eyes darted around the diner with a mix of confusion and relief, like someone who had been lost for hours. "Seat yourself anywhere," Ellie called, gesturing to the nearly empty diner. "I'll be with you in a moment." The stranger nodded gratefully and slid into a booth by the window, where raindrops were beginning to streak the glass. A late April storm was rolling in from the Pacific, the kind that usually brought power outages and flooded streets to their little town. Ellie grabbed a menu and made her way over. Up close, she could see the fine details of his suit, definitely designer despite its current state, and the expensive watch peeking out from his sleeve. A businessman, probably, who had taken a wrong turn off the interstate. "Welcome to Sandy's. Coffee?" she asked, already reaching for the pot. "God, yes, please." His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't quite place, cultured but with an edge of something foreign. "I've been driving for hours. Got completely turned around trying to find my hotel." "You're not from around here," Ellie stated the obvious as she filled his cup. The man gave a tired smile, revealing perfect white teeth. "That obvious, huh? I'm Daniel Reyes." He extended his hand, and Ellie shook it briefly, noting the softness of his palm. Not a man used to manual labor. "Ellie, where are you trying to get to? Most hotels are back toward the interstate, about 20 miles east." Daniel ran a hand through his dark hair, making it stand up even more. "The Ocean View Resort. My GPS kept sending me down roads that don't seem to exist anymore." Ellie couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her. "The Ocean View? That's because it's on the other side of the bay. You'd need to go all the way around or take the ferry, but that stopped running at 8. His face fell. "You're kidding. I have an important meeting there tomorrow morning. The storm's getting worse too," Ellie added, glancing out the window at the increasingly heavy rain. "Some of the coastal roads might already be flooded." Daniel sighed and took a long drink of his coffee. "Any chance there's a hotel in town that might have a vacancy? Anything will do at this point." Ellie bit her lip. The only motel in Harborview had closed last year, unable to compete with the bigger chains near the highway. The nearest option was a bed and breakfast about 5 miles up the coast, run by an elderly couple who were probably asleep by now. "Not really," she admitted. "The nearest place would be Mrs. Patel's B&B, but I doubt they're taking guests this late." The look of defeat on Daniel's face tugged at something in Ellie. It wasn't his fault he was stranded, and despite his obvious wealth, there was something genuinely vulnerable about him sitting there, lost and tired in their little diner at midnight. "Look, why don't you order something to eat while I make a call? I know the owners. Maybe they'll make an exception." Relief flooded his features. "That would be amazing. Thank you." 20 minutes and several phone calls later, Ellie had exhausted all her local connections. Mrs. Patel's phone went straight to voicemail, and the other two people she knew with spare rooms weren't answering either. Meanwhile, the rain had turned into a downpour, drumming against the diner's roof with increasing intensity. "Frank says there's a flash flood warning for the coastal roads," she told Daniel as she refilled his coffee cup. He had ordered a sandwich but had barely touched it, too preoccupied with checking his phone and making calls of his own. "Perfect," he muttered, running a hand over his face. "Just perfect. And of course, there's no cell service half the time here." "The storm interferes with the signal," Ellie explained. "It happens a lot during the rainy season." Daniel looked up at her, and Ellie noticed for the first time how striking his eyes were, deep brown with flecks of amber, framed by long lashes any woman would envy. He looked exhausted, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "I need to get to that meeting. It's too important to miss. Maybe if I try to leave now, I can beat the worst of the flooding." Ellie shook her head. "That's not a good idea. The coastal roads are dangerous even in good weather if you don't know them. In a storm like this, at night." She let the implication hang in the air. Frank appeared from the kitchen, untying his apron. "I'm heading out, Ellie. You should too before it gets worse. Martha called, says the power's already out in the east part of town." Ellie nodded, thinking of her 10-year-old daughter, Lily, who was staying with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Winters. The woman was kind but easily flustered, and a power outage would definitely qualify as an emergency in her book. As Frank left, another gust of wind rattled the diner's windows, and the lights flickered ominously. Daniel looked increasingly desperate, checking his watch and then the darkness outside. A thought occurred to Ellie, one that she immediately questioned. She didn't know this man. He was a complete stranger, but he was also clearly in trouble, and she had always been the sort of person who couldn't turn away someone in need. "I have a spare room," she heard herself saying before she'd fully thought it through. "It's nothing fancy, just a small daybed in my home office, but you're welcome to stay the night. At least until the storm passes and you can find your way to the resort." Daniel's head snapped up, surprise evident on his face. "I couldn't impose like that." "It's not an imposition. It's a terrible night and you're stranded. My daughter and I live just a few blocks from here. The alternative is sleeping in your car in our parking lot, which I wouldn't recommend in this weather." For a moment, Daniel seemed to struggle with her offer, pride warring with practicality. Finally, practicality won out. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble, I would be incredibly grateful." "Just following the golden rule," Ellie said with a small smile. "I'd hope someone would do the same for me if I were stuck somewhere in a storm." The look of genuine gratitude on his face reassured her that she was making the right decision. Half an hour later, after closing up the diner, Ellie led Daniel through the rain to her small blue craftsman-style house. It was one of the older homes in Harbor View, with a covered porch and peeling paint that she kept meaning to refresh. The yard was simple but well-maintained, with a small garden that Lily had helped plant last spring. Mrs. Winters opened the door before Ellie could even insert her key, worry etched on her face. "Oh, thank goodness you're home! The power's been flickering and I was getting concerned." Her eyes widened as she noticed Daniel standing behind Ellie, water dripping from his expensive coat onto the porch boards. "This is Daniel," Ellie explained quickly. "He's stranded because of the storm. He'll be staying in the office tonight." Mrs. Winters raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Well, it's a dreadful night to be out. Lily's asleep, been down for hours. She finished all her homework and even read an extra chapter of her book." "Thank you for watching her," Ellie said, handing the older woman an envelope with cash inside, money she could scarcely afford to part with. But Mrs. Winters depended on the income from occasional babysitting. After Mrs. Winters had departed, hurrying through the rain to her house next door, Ellie led Daniel inside. Her home was modest but warm. The living room was furnished with a well-worn sofa and mismatched armchairs, walls decorated with Lily's artwork and a few family photos. A bookshelf overflowed with a mix of children's books and paperback novels. "It's not much," she said, suddenly self-conscious of the shabby furniture and the water stain on the ceiling from the time the roof had leaked last winter. It was a far cry from the luxury resorts someone like him was probably used to. But Daniel was looking around with an expression that seemed almost wistful. "It's lovely," he said quietly. "It feels like a real home." Something in his tone made Ellie pause. There was a genuine appreciation there, not the condescension she had half expected. "The office is this way," she said, leading him down a short hallway past Lily's room, where the door was adorned with a colorful "Keep Out" sign decorated with glitter and stickers. The office was really just a converted storage room, barely big enough for a small desk and the daybed that doubled as a couch. Ellie kept it neat, though, with a small vase of wildflowers on the desk and a homemade quilt folded at the foot of the bed. "The bathroom is across the hall. There are clean towels in the cabinet. I'll find you something dry to change into, though I'm afraid my ex-husband's clothes might be a bit short on you." "You've already done more than enough," Daniel said, setting his wet briefcase down carefully. "I can manage with what I have." Ellie hesitated in the doorway. "Well, if you need anything else, I'm just down the hall. The power might go out completely, so there's a flashlight in the desk drawer." Daniel nodded, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, two strangers brought together by chance and a storm. There was something in his gaze that Ellie couldn't quite read. Curiosity, perhaps, or simply gratitude. "Thank you, Ellie," he said finally. "Not many people would take in a stranger these days." She shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Like I said, just following the golden rule. Good night, Daniel." As she closed the door, Ellie couldn't help but wonder about the man she had just welcomed into her home. There was something about him that didn't quite fit the image of the typical wealthy businessman, a gentleness, a hint of something lost. But that was a mystery for tomorrow. Tonight, she was simply too exhausted to think about anything except getting a few hours of sleep before Lily woke up and discovered they had an unexpected house guest. Outside, the storm raged on, wind howling around the eaves of the old house, but inside, all was quiet and still, save for the soft sound of rain against the windows and the occasional distant rumble of thunder rolling in from the sea. Morning sunlight filtered through the faded curtains of Ellie's bedroom, waking her before her alarm. For a moment, she lay still, listening to the quiet after the storm. The rain had stopped sometime during the night, though she could still hear water dripping from the gutters outside her window. Then she remembered their house guest. Ellie slipped out of bed and pulled on her robe, running a hand through her tangled auburn hair. A glance at the clock told her it was just past 6. Lily wouldn't need to be up for school for another hour. She padded quietly down the hallway, pausing outside the office door. There was no sound from within. Perhaps Daniel was still asleep. In the kitchen, she started the coffee maker and peered out the window. The storm had left branches and debris scattered across the yard, but nothing too serious. The power was still on, thankfully. She was just reaching for mugs when she heard a soft cough behind her. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway, looking remarkably put together despite having slept in a strange house on a too-small daybed. He'd managed to press his shirt somehow, and his hair was neatly combed. The only signs of his ordeal were the slight shadows under his eyes and the still damp condition of his shoes. "Good morning," he said. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Ellie replied, suddenly acutely aware of her threadbare robe and messy hair. "Coffee?" "Please." He moved into the kitchen with a natural grace, looking around appreciatively at the sunny yellow walls and the mismatched but cheerful crockery visible through the glass-fronted cabinets. "You have a lovely home." "It's nothing special, but it's ours," Ellie said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, one bearing a faded "World's Best Mom" slogan and the other decorated with cartoon sea creatures. She handed him the sea creature mug. "Milk? Sugar? Black is fine, thank you." He took the mug with a smile. "I want to thank you again for your hospitality. I called the resort this morning and they've sent a car for me. It should be here in about 30 minutes. Ellie raised an eyebrow. They sent a car? Fancy. Daniel looked slightly embarrassed. It's, part of the package. The resort is quite accommodating. Before Ellie could respond, the patter of small feet announced Lily's arrival. Her daughter appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her unicorn pajamas, her long dark hair a wild tangle around her face. She stopped abruptly when she saw Daniel, her brown eyes wide with curiosity. "Mom? Who's that?" she asked, not bothering to whisper. Ellie smiled. "Lily, this is Mr. Reyes. He got caught in the storm last night and needed a place to stay. Mr. Reyes, this is my daughter, Lily." Daniel crouched down slightly, bringing himself to Lily's level. "It's very nice to meet you, Lily. Thank you for sharing your home with me, and please call me Daniel." Lily studied him with the frank curiosity of a 10-year-old. "Were you scared in the storm? My friend Emma is scared of thunder, but I'm not." "Very brave of you," Daniel replied seriously. "I wasn't scared of the thunder, but I was worried about driving on strange roads in the dark. Your mom was kind enough to help me." Lily seemed satisfied with this explanation and moved on to more pressing matters. "Mom, can I have pancakes, since it's Friday?" Ellie checked the time. "If you get dressed and brush your teeth first, school bus comes in 45 minutes. With an exaggerated sigh that only pre-teens can perfect, Lily trudged back to her room, though not before giving Daniel one more curious look. "She seems like a wonderful child," Daniel said once Lily was out of earshot. "She is." Ellie began gathering pancake ingredients, "though I might be slightly biased. Do you mind if I ask, her father?" The question hung in the air. Ellie measured flour into a bowl before answering. "Not in the picture. He left when Lily was 3. Said he wasn't cut out for family life." She kept her tone matter-of-fact, unwilling to let the old hurt show in front of a stranger, no matter how kind he seemed. Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. His loss, clearly. The simple statement, delivered without pity or judgment, made Ellie look up from her mixing bowl. There was something in Daniel's eyes that suggested he meant it sincerely. Before the moment could stretch into awkwardness, he changed the subject. "Is there anything I can help with? I make a pretty decent cup of coffee, though I'll admit my cooking skills are somewhat limited." Ellie smiled despite herself. "I've got it, thanks. But you can set the table if you'd like. Plates are in that cabinet." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Daniel setting the small kitchen table while Ellie mixed pancake batter and heated the griddle. There was something oddly domestic about the scene, as if they had done this many times before. "So, this important meeting," Ellie said as she poured the first pancake onto the sizzling surface. "Must be quite something if they're sending a car for you." Daniel leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee. "It's for a potential investment. I'm looking at purchasing some property along the coast to develop a new resort and nature preserve." "Here in Harborview?" Ellie flipped a pancake, trying to hide her surprise. "Possibly. This area has beautiful coastline that's still relatively untouched by commercial development. The plan would be to create something sustainable that benefits the local community while preserving the natural ecosystem." It sounded rehearsed, like a pitch he'd given many times, but there was genuine enthusiasm in his voice. "That's not what I expected," Ellie admitted. "Most developers who come through here just want to build condos and gift shops." Daniel's expression turned serious. "I'm not most developers. My company specializes in eco-friendly projects that work with communities, not against them." Before Ellie could ask more questions, Lily reappeared, now dressed in jeans and a bright purple sweater, her hair hastily pulled into a lopsided ponytail. "Pancakes ready yet? I'm starving," she announced dramatically. "First batch coming up," Ellie said, sliding 3 golden pancakes onto a plate. Lily climbed into her chair and immediately drowned her pancakes in maple syrup. Daniel watched with amusement as she cut them into bite-sized pieces and began eating with enthusiasm. "Do you have kids, Mr. Daniel?" Lily asked between mouthfuls. "Lily, don't be nosy," Ellie admonished gently, placing a second batch of pancakes on the table. "It's fine," Daniel assured her. "And no, Lily, I don't have children." "Are you married?" "Lily?" Ellie's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Daniel laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "No, I'm not married either. My work keeps me traveling a lot, so I haven't had much time for family." Lily considered this as she chewed. "That's sad," she declared finally. "Everyone should have a family." An uncomfortable silence followed her pronouncement. Daniel's smile faded slightly, and Ellie busied herself with cleaning the griddle, unsure how to respond. "Sometimes people find different kinds of families," Daniel said eventually. "Friends can be like family, too." Lily nodded sagely. "Like Mrs. Winters. She's not really our grandma, but Mom says she's family anyway." "Exactly," Daniel agreed, seeming relieved by the child's acceptance of his explanation. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they finished breakfast. Lily chattered about her school project on marine ecosystems, and Daniel surprised them both with his knowledge of local sea life. "How do you know so much about starfish?" Lily asked, impressed. "I studied marine biology in college before I went into business," Daniel explained. "The ocean has always fascinated me." Ellie found herself reevaluating her initial impression of him, not just a wealthy businessman then, but someone with depth and genuine interests beyond making money. Before long, the honk of the school bus interrupted their conversation. Lily gathered her backpack and lunchbox, then hesitated in the doorway. "Will you still be here when I get home from school, Mr. Daniel?" she asked. Daniel glanced at Ellie before answering. "I don't think so, Lily. I have my meeting today and then I'll probably be heading back to the resort." "Oh." Lily's disappointment was evident. "Well, bye then. Thanks for not being scary like most strangers." With that candid farewell, she was gone, leaving the adults in a moment of surprised silence before they both broke into laughter. "High praise indeed," Daniel said, still smiling. "Not being scary like most strangers." "She has a unique way with words," Ellie agreed, gathering the breakfast dishes. "Though I should probably have another talk with her about stranger danger." Daniel began helping clear the table without being asked. "She seems like a very intelligent child. You've done an excellent job with her." "I've tried," Ellie said simply, touched by the sincerity in his voice. They had just finished washing the dishes when the sound of tires on gravel announced the arrival of Daniel's ride. Through the kitchen window, Ellie glimpsed a sleek black car with tinted windows, far more luxurious than typical resort transportation. "That would be my car," Daniel said, drying his hands on a dish towel. He seemed almost reluctant to leave. "I can't thank you enough for everything, Ellie." "It was nothing," she insisted, walking him to the door. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said firmly. "Not everyone would have. What you did was exceptional, and I won't forget it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, offering it to her. "If you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call. Day or night." Ellie took the card somewhat reluctantly. "That's very kind, but really not necessary." "Please," he insisted. "It would make me feel better knowing you have my contact information." The card was heavy, made of expensive stock with embossed lettering. Daniel Reyes, CEO, Horizon Developments International. Below that, a phone number and email address. CEO, not just some mid-level executive then. Ellie looked up at him with new understanding. "You're the boss," she stated. Daniel shrugged modestly. "It's my company, yes? And you were going to sleep in your car in a diner parking lot?" That drew a laugh from him. "I've slept in worse places. Before I built the company, I backpacked across South America with nothing but a sleeping bag and a few changes of clothes." The car honked again, more insistently this time. "I should go," Daniel said, but still he lingered in the doorway. "Perhaps, would it be all right if I stopped by before I leave town, just to say goodbye properly?" Ellie hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Sure, we're usually home by 6 in the evening." "Thank you." His smile was warm, reaching all the way to his eyes. For everything. As he walked to the waiting car, Ellie couldn't help noticing how the driver rushed to open the door for him, the deference in the man's posture unmistakable. Daniel gave her one last wave before disappearing into the vehicle. Closing the door, Ellie leaned against it for a moment, Daniel's business card still in her hand. CEO of an international development company. And he had slept on her lumpy daybed and eaten pancakes at her chipped kitchen table. With a shake of her head, she tucked the card into her pocket. Time to get ready for her own workday. A double shift at the diner again, covering for a sick co-worker. The brief interlude with Daniel Reyes already felt like a strange dream, something that happened to someone else in another life. But as she glanced out the window and saw the black car pulling away, she couldn't quite shake the feeling that their paths would cross again. And soon. The lunch rush at Sandy's diner had finally subsided, giving Ellie a moment to catch her breath. She leaned against the counter, massaging her lower back where a persistent ache had settled in. Double shifts were taking their toll more than they used to, a fact she tried not to dwell on. "You look beat, honey," Frank commented as he wiped down the grill. "That storm keep you up last night?" "Something like that," Ellie replied, not mentioning her unexpected house guest. Frank was a good man, but also Harborview's most notorious gossip. The last thing she needed was the whole town talking about how she'd taken in a strange man during the storm. "Well, looks like we might get another round of bad weather tonight," Frank continued, gesturing toward the diner's windows where dark clouds were already gathering on the horizon. "Spring storms coming one after another this year." Ellie glanced at the sky with concern. More rain meant fewer customers, and fewer customers meant smaller tips. She'd been counting on a busy weekend to help cover Lily's upcoming school field trip to the aquarium in Portland. The diner's door opened, letting in a gust of cool air, along with Marge Peterson, the town's librarian, and one of Ellie's regular customers. "Afternoon, Ellie," Marge called, settling onto her usual stool at the counter. "Coffee and a slice of apple pie if you've got it." "Coming right up," Ellie replied, already reaching for the coffee pot. "How's everything at the library?" "Busy, actually. Got some fancy consultants in town looking at our building, talking about renovations, maybe even an expansion." Marge's eyes lit up with excitement. "Apparently, some big development company is interested in investing in community improvements throughout Harborview. Can you believe it?" Ellie nearly dropped the coffee pot. "Development company? Horizon something or other," Marge continued, oblivious to Ellie's sudden interest. "Their CEO himself is in town, if you can imagine. Ruth at the town hall says he's been meeting with the mayor all morning." "Is that so?" Ellie tried to keep her voice casual as she cut a generous slice of pie. Word is they're looking at several properties along the coast, but they also want to invest in the town itself. Library, community center, maybe even help rebuild that old pier that collapsed last winter." Marge leaned forward conspiratorially. "And Ruth says this CEO is quite the looker, single too." Ellie felt her cheeks warm slightly. "I'm sure he is," she murmured, placing the pie in front of Marge. "Not that someone like that would look twice at folks like us," Marge said matter-of-factly, spearing a bite of pie with her fork. "These rich types usually stick to their own kind." The comment, innocent as it was, stung Ellie more than it should have. She busied herself with wiping down the counter, trying to push away thoughts of Daniel's warm smile across her kitchen table that morning. Marge was right, of course. Men like Daniel Reyes, CEOs of international companies, didn't get involved with small-town waitresses with second-hand furniture and mounting bills. The fact that he'd been kind and genuinely appreciative of her help didn't mean anything beyond basic human decency. The rest of her shift passed slowly, the diner unusually quiet as people stayed home ahead of the approaching storm. By 5 o'clock, even Frank suggested closing early. "No sense keeping the lights on if nobody's coming in," he said pragmatically. "Head home to your girl, Ellie. I'll finish closing up." Normally, Ellie would have protested. She needed every hour of pay she could get. But today, fatigue won out. "Thanks, Frank. I owe you one." Outside, the wind had picked up considerably, bending the tops of the pine trees that lined Main Street. Ellie pulled her jacket tighter around herself and hurried toward Mrs. Winter's house to pick up Lily. Her daughter was usually at the neighbor's for a few hours after school on days when Ellie worked late. The elderly woman answered the door with surprise. "Ellie, didn't expect you for another hour at least." "Frank closed the diner early," Ellie explained. "Storm coming in." "So they say." "Well, come in, come in. Lily's just finishing her homework." Ellie followed Mrs. Winters into her cozy living room, where Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, math workbook open in front of her. Crayon drawings and construction paper cutouts surrounded her. Clearly, homework had given way to more creative pursuits. "Mom!" Lily exclaimed, jumping up. "You're early! Did you see Mr. Daniel again? He said he might come say goodbye before he leaves." Mrs. Winters raised an eyebrow, and Ellie felt her cheeks warm for the second time that day. "No, sweetie, I haven't seen him. And we should get home before the rain starts. Gather your things, please." As Lily collected her school supplies and artwork, Mrs. Winters pulled Ellie aside. "Mr. Daniel?" she asked quietly. "The stranded traveler from last night," Ellie explained briefly. "Just someone caught in the storm who needed a place to stay. Nothing more to it than that." Mrs. Winters didn't look convinced, but she didn't press the issue. "Well, Lily certainly took a shine to him. Hasn't stopped talking about him all afternoon." Ellie sighed. That was just what she needed. Lily getting attached to someone who was about to disappear from their lives as quickly as he'd entered it. The walk home was rushed, dark clouds looming ever closer. They were barely through the front door when fat raindrops began to pelt the windows, quickly turning into a steady downpour. "Looks like another movie night," Ellie said, hanging up their jackets. "Why don't you pick something while I start dinner?" Lily was uncharacteristically quiet as she sorted through their small DVD collection. "Everything okay, sweetie?" Ellie asked, concerned by her daughter's subdued mood. Lily looked up, her expression serious. "Mom, do you think Mr. Daniel will really come back to say goodbye?" Ellie's heart sank a little. "I don't know, honey. He's a very busy man with an important job. But even if he doesn't, that's okay. He was just passing through." "But he said he would," Lily insisted. "And he knew all about starfish and tide pools and stuff. I wanted to show him my marine biology book." Ellie knelt beside her daughter, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "I know, but sometimes adults get busy with work and other responsibilities. Try not to be disappointed if he can't make it, okay?" Lily nodded reluctantly, selecting a DVD about ocean creatures, no doubt influenced by her conversation with Daniel that morning. In the kitchen, Ellie tried to focus on making a simple pasta dinner, pushing away her own irrational disappointment. Daniel had only mentioned stopping by as a polite gesture. He probably hadn't meant it seriously, just something people said out of obligation. The sound of an engine outside caught her attention. Through the rain-streaked kitchen window, she saw headlights turn into her driveway. Not the sleek black car from this morning, but a more modest rental sedan. Her pulse quickened as she watched a figure dash from the car to her porch, hunched against the rain. A moment later, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it!" Lily shouted, already racing to the door. "Lily, wait!" Ellie began, but her daughter had already flung the door open. "Mr. Daniel! You came back!" Lily's excited voice carried through the house. Ellie moved to the hallway to see Daniel standing on her porch, slightly damp despite his quick dash from the car. He held a large gift bag in one hand and what looked like a bakery box in the other. "I promised I would," he was telling Lily with a smile. "And I never break my promises." His eyes lifted to meet Ellie's, and something in his gaze, a mix of warmth and uncertainty, made her heart skip a beat. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "I brought dinner, as a thank you." Ellie found herself momentarily speechless. You brought dinner? She finally managed. Daniel held up the bags. From Lorenzo's in Portland. Their seafood pasta is incredible and tiramisu for dessert. He hesitated. But if you've already made plans, we were just going to have spaghetti, Lily interjected quickly. Your dinner sounds way better, right, Mom? Ellie laughed despite herself. You'd better come in before you get soaked, she said, stepping aside. Daniel entered, passing the bags to Ellie and removing his wet coat. Underneath, he wore a casual blue button-down and dark jeans, considerably more relaxed than his business attire from that morning. I hope you don't mind that I changed, he said, noticing her glance. The meetings ran long and the suit was getting uncomfortable. Of course not, Ellie replied, leading the way to the kitchen. We're pretty casual around here, as you can see. I brought you something, Daniel told Lily, reaching into his coat pocket and pulling out a small package wrapped in silver paper. A little thank you for sharing your home with me. Lily's eyes widened as she took the gift. Can I open it now, Mom? Sure, but remember your manners, Ellie reminded her, setting the food on the counter. Lily carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a beautiful snow globe. Inside was a detailed miniature scene of the Oregon coastline, complete with tiny seals on rocks, seagulls, and a lighthouse. When shaken, the snow was actually glittering blue particles that mimicked the ocean. It's beautiful, Lily breathed, turning it over in her hands. Look, Mom, it's just like our beach. It is, Ellie agreed, impressed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. What do you say to Mr. Daniel? Thank you so much. Lily launched herself at Daniel, hugging him around the waist. I'm going to put it on my special shelf. Daniel looked momentarily startled by the child's enthusiastic embrace, but then his expression softened, and he gently patted her back. You're very welcome, Lily. As Lily dashed off to her room with her new treasure, Daniel turned to Ellie. I hope that was okay. I saw it in a shop near the resort and thought she might like it. It's perfect, Ellie assured him, touched by his consideration. You really didn't have to bring gifts, though. Or dinner. He shrugged, looking almost sheepish. I wanted to. Today's meetings went well, largely because I arrived on time and well-rested thanks to you. Consider it professional gratitude. The way he said it, with a slight emphasis on professional, seemed deliberate, as if he was trying to make it clear he wasn't presuming anything more. Ellie appreciated the gesture. Well, whatever the reason, thank you, it smells amazing, she said, opening the containers of food. The aroma of garlic, fresh herbs, and seafood filled the kitchen. How did your meetings go? She asked as she gathered plates and silverware. Marge, she's our town librarian, mentioned you met with the mayor today. Daniel looked surprised. Word travels fast in small towns, doesn't it? Faster than the internet, Ellie confirmed with a smile. So, are you planning to transform our sleepy little town into a tourist destination? Not exactly, Daniel replied, helping her set the table without being asked. I'm more interested in preservation than transformation. Harborview has a unique charm and natural beauty that should be enhanced, not replaced. There was genuine passion in his voice that caught Ellie's attention. This wasn't just business talk. He really seemed to care. The library renovation Marge mentioned is just one part of it, he continued. I'd like to invest in community spaces, restore some of the historical buildings downtown, improve access to the nature trails along the coast. That sounds actually wonderful, Ellie admitted. Most developers who come through here just want to build condos and trendy coffee shops that none of the locals can afford. Daniel's expression grew serious. I've seen too many small communities destroyed by that kind of development. It drives up costs, pushes out local businesses, and turns vibrant towns into soulless tourist traps. That's not what I want for Harborview. Before Ellie could respond, Lily returned, eager to show Daniel the special shelf in her room where she'd placed the snow globe alongside her most treasured possessions. A collection of seashells, a photograph of her as a baby with Ellie, and a small carved wooden dolphin. As they settled in to eat the delicious meal Daniel had brought, the storm continued to rage outside. But inside, the small house was filled with warmth, laughter, and conversation that flowed easily between the three of them. Ellie found herself relaxing, the stress and fatigue of her long day melting away in Daniel's presence. It was only later, after Lily had gone to bed and Daniel was preparing to leave, that a troubling thought occurred to her. It was dangerous to get used to this, to having someone else at the table, to seeing Lily's face light up with joy over a thoughtful gift, to feeling like part of something larger than just their little twosome. Because no matter how kind or genuine Daniel seemed, no matter how much he appeared to enjoy their company, the reality remained unchanged. He was a successful CEO with a life far removed from theirs. And soon, very soon, he would return to that life, leaving Ellie to explain to Lily why their new friend wasn't coming back. Daniel's rental car idled in Ellie's driveway, the wipers sweeping rhythmically across the windshield as rain continued to pour down. He hadn't started driving yet, just sat there watching the golden light from her windows, seeing the silhouette of Ellie moving around inside. Something tugged at his chest, an unfamiliar sensation that both alarmed and intrigued him. He hadn't planned to come back tonight. In fact, he'd explicitly told his assistant to clear his evening schedule for conference calls with investors. But after a day of meetings, productive ones admittedly, all he could think about was the small blue house with its peeling paint and the warm welcome he'd received inside. "Get it together, Reyes," he muttered to himself, finally putting the car in reverse. He had a company to run, multi-million-dollar deals to close. He couldn't afford distractions no matter how appealing. Yet as he drove back to the luxurious oceanfront suite waiting for him at the resort, his mind kept returning to the way Lily's face had lit up when she'd opened his gift and the genuine smile Ellie had given him across her kitchen table. His phone rang through the car's speakers. The caller ID displayed Victoria Chen, his chief operating officer and oldest friend. "Vic," he answered, grateful for the distraction. "How's New York?" "Rainy, crowded, and overpriced," she replied dryly. "So business as usual. How's your little fishing village? Found any good investment opportunities?" "Harborview," he corrected automatically. "And yes, actually, the coastal property is perfect. Pristine beachfront, protected cove, enough land for the resort and nature preserve. The town council seems enthusiastic about the community improvement proposals. I'm meeting with the environmental assessment team tomorrow." "Sounds promising. Any local opposition?" Daniel hesitated. "Not yet, but there's always someone. I'm trying to get ahead of it with the community investment package." "Smart," Victoria approved. "What about that meeting with the lawyer, the one with the heritage property?" "Scheduled for tomorrow afternoon." Daniel signaled to turn onto the coastal highway leading to the resort. "The property is exactly what we're looking for. Historic lighthouse with adjacent land. If we can work out an agreement, it would be the centerpiece of the development." "Well, just be careful. These small-town property negotiations can get messy fast, especially with heritage sites. People get sentimental." Daniel thought about Ellie's modest home, filled with handmade decorations and children's artwork. "Sometimes sentiment has value too, Vic." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's not like you, Danny. Everything okay?" "Fine," he said quickly. "Just tired. It's been a long day." "Okay." Victoria didn't sound convinced. "Well, get some rest. Don't forget we have the investor call at 7 a.m. your time." After ending the call, Daniel drove in silence, the windshield wipers keeping time with his thoughts. Victoria was right to be surprised. He'd built his reputation and his fortune on being pragmatic and unsentimental. Horizon Development succeeded because he could see opportunities where others saw only risks, because he could make tough decisions without getting emotionally involved. So why couldn't he stop thinking about a waitress and her daughter in a little blue house? Back at the oceanfront suite, he spread out the files his team had prepared about the Harborview properties. The The proposed resort would be his company's most ambitious eco-tourism project yet. Luxury accommodations designed to blend with the natural environment, a marine research center open to the public, hiking trails, and protected wildlife areas. The cornerstone of the development would be the historic Cape Ridge Lighthouse property, currently a modest tourist attraction operated by a local trust, but with the potential to become something extraordinary. The trust was considering selling due to mounting maintenance costs and dwindling visitors. Daniel opened the file containing information about the trust members. Most were local business owners and longtime residents, including... He paused, staring at a familiar name. Marge Peterson, town librarian. The same Marge that Ellie had mentioned. Harborview really was a small town. He made a mental note to speak with the librarian personally at tomorrow's meeting. Local support would be crucial for the lighthouse acquisition, especially from trust members. His phone buzzed with a text from Jason Kim, his local project manager. "Sir, town meeting confirmed for Friday 7 p.m. to present initial proposals. Mayor suggests informal approach. No suits, no PowerPoints. These people are suspicious of corporate types." His words. Daniel smiled slightly. The mayor was right, of course. Walking into a town hall meeting with a polished corporate presentation would immediately alienate the very people whose support they needed. He texted back, "Agreed. Casual approach. I'll handle the presentation personally." Almost without thinking, he found himself wondering if Ellie would attend the town meeting. Would she support the development? Or would she see it as just another threat to her community? Her opinion suddenly mattered to him far more than it logically should. Pushing those thoughts aside, he turned to the financial projections, immersing himself in numbers and market analyses until his eyes grew heavy. Outside, the storm continued to lash against the windows of his luxurious suite, yet somehow it felt colder and emptier than the modest spare room where he'd slept the night before. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having blown itself out overnight. Ellie had just finished the breakfast rush at Sandy's when the bell above the door jingled. Looking up, she was startled to see Daniel walking in, dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "Good morning," he said, sliding onto an empty stool at the counter. "I was hoping I might catch you here." Ellie tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious of her work uniform and the coffee stain on her apron. "Good morning. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. I have meetings in town today," he explained. "Thought I'd stop by for the best coffee in Harborview." She raised an eyebrow as she poured him a cup. "The only coffee in Harborview, you mean? Unless you count the gas station." "Quality over quantity," he replied with a smile that made something flutter in her stomach. Frank poked his head out from the kitchen. "Ellie, who's your friend?" "This is Daniel," she said, deliberately omitting his last name and title. "He was stranded here during the storm the other night." Frank's eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed Daniel. "Storm, huh? Lots of damage out on the coastal road. Tree came down on the Peterson place, took out their fence." "No damage at my place, thankfully," Ellie said, hoping to deflect any further questions. Frank seemed to take the hint, retreating back to his grill with a final curious glance at Daniel. "So," Ellie said more quietly, "more meetings about your development project?" Daniel nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "We're presenting the initial concepts at the town meeting tomorrow night. Will you be there?" "I'm scheduled to work," Ellie replied, "but I usually hear about everything from Marge anyway." "Marge Peterson? The librarian?" "That's her, Harborview's most reliable news source." Ellie smiled. "Why do you ask?" "She's on the Lighthouse Trust. I'm meeting with them this afternoon." Ellie's expression changed. "The lighthouse? That's part of your development plan?" "It would be the centerpiece," Daniel confirmed. "We want to restore it, make it accessible to more visitors, add an educational component about marine conservation. A lot of people around here are very attached to that lighthouse," Ellie said carefully. "It's been here longer than most of the town." My grandmother used to tell stories about how it saved ships during the big storm of '62. Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. That's exactly the kind of history we want to preserve and share. The lighthouse wouldn't change. We'd just ensure it's maintained properly and incorporated respectfully into the larger development. Before Ellie could respond, the bell jingled again as a group of construction workers entered, filling the diner with noise. She gave Daniel an apologetic look. "Duty calls," she said, reaching for menus. "Of course." He hesitated. "Would it be all right if I stopped by tonight? I'd like to tell you more about the project. Get your perspective." Something in his tone told Ellie this wasn't just a casual request. "My perspective? Why would that matter?" "Because you know this town, the people, the history, and—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I value your opinion." The simple honesty in his voice caught her off guard. "Sure," she found herself saying. "We're usually home by 6. His smile was worth the flutter of uncertainty she felt afterward. "I'll be there." As the morning progressed into afternoon, Ellie found herself thinking about Daniel's visit more than she should. Why did he really want her opinion? She wasn't anyone important in town, not on any committees or boards, not a business owner or community leader, just a single mom waiting tables and trying to make ends meet. "You're overthinking it," she muttered to herself as she refilled salt shakers during the slow period between lunch and dinner. "Talking to yourself now?" Frank asked, emerging from the kitchen. "First sign of trouble." "Just thinking out loud," Ellie replied. Frank studied her for a moment. "This about that guy from this morning? The one who got stranded in the storm?" "What? No. Well, not really." Ellie fumbled with a salt shaker, nearly dropping it. "He's just passing through town for business." "Uh-huh." Frank looked unconvinced. "Passing through in a mighty nice car for someone who claims he got lost in a storm. And that watch he was wearing? Worth more than my truck, I'd bet." "He's here about the new development project," Ellie admitted, seeing no point in further evasion. "The eco-resort they're planning to build along the coast." Frank's expression darkened. "That's so? Another bunch of out-of-towners coming to tell us how to improve our home? We've seen how that goes before." "It's not like that," Ellie found herself saying, surprised by her own defensiveness. "He's talking about community investments, preserving the natural environment, creating jobs." "That's what they all say until the contracts are signed," Frank said grimly. "Then suddenly it's all about profit margins and attracting the right clientele." He made air quotes around the last word. "Next thing you know, places like Sandy's get pushed out for artisanal coffee shops and boutiques selling overpriced knickknacks." "Daniel wouldn't," Ellie began, then stopped herself. The truth was, she didn't really know what Daniel would or wouldn't do. She'd known him for all of 2 days. Frank's expression softened slightly. "Look, Ellie, I've seen you struggle since Tom left. Working double shifts, pinching pennies to give Lily a good life. You're one of the hardest working people I know. Just be careful around smooth-talking developers, okay? Men like that live in a different world than folks like us." With a pat on her shoulder, Frank returned to the kitchen, leaving Ellie with a hollow feeling in her stomach. He wasn't saying anything she hadn't already thought herself. Daniel did live in a different world. One of luxury hotels, private cars, and international business deals. Yet there had been something in his eyes when he'd sat at her kitchen table, something genuine in the way he'd spoken to Lily. She couldn't reconcile the image of a cold, calculating developer with the man who'd brought a thoughtful gift for a child he barely knew. By the time her shift ended at 4, Ellie's thoughts were still circling around Daniel and his mysterious interest in her opinions. She stopped by the market on her way home, splurging on ingredients for a proper home-cooked meal. If he was coming over again, she wanted to return the gesture from the night before. As she walked home, grocery bags in hand, she passed the old lighthouse on the bluff overlooking the harbor. It had stood there for over a century, its white tower a reassuring presence visible from almost everywhere in town. The idea of it becoming part of a resort development made her uneasy, despite Daniel's assurances about preservation. Would Harborview still feel like home if it became a destination for wealthy tourists? Would she and Lily still belong here? The questions followed her all the way home, where she found Lily already waiting on the porch with Mrs. Winters. "Mom!" Lily called excitedly. "Mrs. Winters says Mr. Daniel was at the lighthouse today with a bunch of people in fancy clothes. Do you think he'll come see us again?" Ellie exchanged a look with Mrs. Winters, who raised her eyebrows knowingly. "Actually," Ellie said, setting down her grocery bags to hug her daughter, "he might stop by tonight, but don't get too excited. It's just to talk about his work in town." Lily's face lit up anyway. "I knew he'd come back. I'm going to show him my science project. It's about ocean conservation, and he knows all about that stuff." As Lily raced inside to prepare for their visitor, Mrs. Winters lingered on the porch. "This Daniel," she said quietly. "He's the one everyone's talking about, isn't he? The developer with big plans for Harborview." Ellie nodded reluctantly. "Yes, but I don't think his intentions are bad, Mrs. Winters. He seems to genuinely care about preserving the town's character." The older woman looked thoughtful. "Perhaps, but be careful, dear. Not just for your sake, but for Lily's. That child is already halfway to smitten with your Mr. Daniel, and children's hearts break just as easily as ours do, perhaps easier." With those words hanging in the air, Mrs. Winters departed, leaving Ellie with the unsettling realization that her daughter wasn't the only one in danger of having her heart broken when Daniel Reyes inevitably returned to his real life, far away from their little blue house in Harborview. The aroma of herb-roasted chicken filled Ellie's small kitchen as she checked the oven for the third time in 10 minutes. Lily was setting the table with their mismatched plates, carefully arranging them alongside the fancy cloth napkins they usually saved for holidays. "Do you think Mr. Daniel likes green beans?" Lily asked, eyeing the vegetable dish with suspicion. "I don't like them, but Ms. Reynolds says we should try new foods at least 10 times before deciding." "Very wise of Ms. Reynolds," Ellie replied, stirring the pot of green beans she'd seasoned with bacon bits, a trick that usually made vegetables more appealing to her daughter. "And yes, I think most grown-ups like green beans." "He's not like most grown-ups," Lily declared confidently. "He actually listens when I talk about stuff. Dad never did." The casual observation caught Ellie off guard. Lily rarely mentioned her father these days, and when she did, it was usually with the same matter-of-fact tone as if discussing a distant acquaintance rather than the man who'd abandoned them 7 years ago. "Well, that's Mr. Daniel's job," Ellie said carefully. "He talks to people for a living. You talk to people for a living too, but that's different." Lily arranged the forks with careful precision. "He asks questions because he really wants to know the answers." Before Ellie could respond to this astute observation, the doorbell rang. Lily was off like a shot, her socked feet sliding on the wooden floor as she raced to answer the door. "Wait for me!" Ellie called, hastily wiping her hands on a dishcloth and following. Too late. Lily had already flung the door open to reveal Daniel standing on the porch, looking more casual than ever in dark jeans and a light blue sweater, his hair slightly windblown. He carried a bottle of wine in one hand and a folder in the other. "Mr. Daniel," Lily exclaimed, "you came back again. Mom made chicken and even green beans even though I don't like them, but I'm going to try them 10 times. Daniel laughed, the genuine sound warming Ellie's heart despite her reservations. "Hello, Lily. That sounds like an excellent scientific approach to green beans." His eyes found Ellie's over Lily's head. "And hello to you too. I hope I'm not too early." "Right on time," Ellie assured him, gesturing him inside. "Dinner's almost ready." "I brought wine," he said, offering the bottle, "and some information about the development project, as promised." Ellie accepted both, glancing at the wine label and trying not to show her surprise at what was undoubtedly an expensive vintage. "Thank you. This is very nice. I also brought dessert," Daniel added, reaching into his jacket pocket to produce a small box of chocolates, which he handed to Lily. "For after dinner, with your mom's permission." Lily's eyes widened at the elegant box with its gold ribbon. "Fancy chocolate, thanks, Mr. Daniel." Daniel followed them into the kitchen, where he immediately noticed the care that had gone into preparing dinner. "This looks and smells amazing," he said with genuine appreciation. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "It's no trouble," Ellie replied, though in truth, she'd spent more time on this meal than any she'd prepared in months. "Consider it my return gesture for the dinner you brought yesterday." As they settled around the table, Ellie couldn't help noticing how natural it felt to have Daniel in her home again, as if he belonged in the third chair that usually sat empty. Lily chatted animatedly about her school day and her ocean conservation project, while Daniel listened with the attentive interest that had so impressed her daughter. "So you're actually building something that measures microplastics in water?" Daniel asked, clearly impressed. Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Ms. Reynolds says we need to track pollution better if we want to fix it. I'm using a special filter system." She frowned slightly. "But some of the parts are expensive. Mom says we have to look for alternatives." Daniel glanced at Ellie, who felt a flush of embarrassment. She didn't like advertising their financial limitations, especially to someone who probably spent more on a single meal at a fancy restaurant than her entire weekly grocery budget. "Innovation often comes from finding creative alternatives," Daniel said smoothly, turning back to Lily. "Some of the best inventions happened because people had to work with limited resources." "Like MacGyver?" Lily asked brightly. Daniel laughed. "Exactly like MacGyver, though maybe with fewer explosions." The conversation flowed easily through dinner, with Daniel complimenting the meal multiple times. He insisted on helping clear the table afterward, despite Ellie's protests. "I'll do the dishes," Lily volunteered, clearly trying to make a good impression. "You grown-ups can talk about the boring development stuff." Daniel winked at her. "I happen to think development is very exciting, but I appreciate your offer." Once Lily was occupied with dishes, with strict instructions from Ellie about being careful with the good plates, they moved to the living room where Daniel spread out several documents on the coffee table. "These are the preliminary plans for the Cape Harbor Eco Resort," he explained, showing Ellie a series of architectural renderings. "Everything is designed to minimize environmental impact while maximizing views and natural experiences." Ellie leaned closer, studying the images. The buildings were beautiful, low-profile structures built with natural materials that seemed to blend into the landscape rather than dominate it. Large windows faced the ocean, and green roofs covered with native plants made the structures almost disappear when viewed from above. "It's not what I expected," she admitted. "I was picturing something more. Corporate? Imposing?" Daniel suggested. "Something like that." He nodded. "That's precisely what we're trying to avoid. The resort will have just 40 guest units, a restaurant sourcing ingredients from local farms and fishermen, a small spa using local botanical products, and the Marine Research Center, which will be open to the public." He flipped to another page showing the lighthouse. "And here's our vision for Cape Ridge. The lighthouse itself would remain untouched externally, but the interior would be restored to its original condition on the lower floors, with a small museum about local maritime history." "And what about access for locals?" Ellie asked, the question that had been bothering her all day. "Will people from Harborview still be able to visit the lighthouse without paying resort prices?" Daniel's expression brightened, as if he'd been hoping she would ask this specific question. "Absolutely. That's one of our non-negotiable points in the proposal. All Harborview residents would have free access to the lighthouse, the nature trails, and the public areas of the research center. We'd also establish a community program for local students to participate in marine research projects." He pulled out another document. "And here's the community investment package. Renovation funds for the library, restoration of the town pier, improvements to the community center, and a scholarship fund for Harborview High graduates pursuing environmental studies or sustainable tourism degrees. That's quite generous, Ellie said, genuinely surprised by the scope of the proposal. It's good business, Daniel replied. A thriving community means a thriving resort. We want to be partners with Harborview, not parasites. His candor was refreshing, and Ellie found herself warming to the project despite her initial reservations. And what's the timeline for all of this? If everything goes according to plan, construction would begin next spring and last about 18 months. The community projects would start immediately after approval, though. We don't want to wait on those. Ellie was about to ask another question when Lily appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Dishes are done, Mom. Can we have the fancy chocolates now?" Daniel grinned. An excellent suggestion. As they enjoyed the chocolates, which were indeed exceptional, Lily peppered Daniel with questions about the Marine Research Center. Her excitement grew when he explained that there would be internship opportunities for local students. "I could work there when I'm older," she exclaimed. "I already know all about the tide pools and the different kinds of seaweed that grow here." "You'd be an excellent candidate," Daniel assured her. "We're especially interested in local knowledge." As the evening progressed, Ellie found herself increasingly conflicted. On one hand, the development truly did seem thoughtfully designed to benefit Harborview rather than exploit it. On the other hand, change was always unpredictable, and she couldn't shake the feeling that once the process began, the town would never be quite the same. And then there was Daniel himself, kind, attentive, genuinely interested in her opinions and her daughter's enthusiasms. It would be so easy to let herself be charmed by him, to imagine possibilities that simply couldn't exist between a waitress with a second-hand couch and a CEO with a portfolio of luxury properties. Eventually, it was time for Lily to go to bed, though she protested vehemently. "But I want to hear more about the research center and the Lighthouse Museum." "Tomorrow," Ellie said firmly. "It's already past your bedtime." Lily sighed dramatically but turned to Daniel. "Will you come to my school science fair next week? It's on Thursday at 6:30. I'm going to have my microplastics filter all set up." Daniel looked momentarily caught off guard by the invitation. Lily," Ellie interjected. "Mr. Daniel will probably be gone by then. He's only in town for business." "Actually," Daniel said slowly, "I'll be here through the end of next week at least. There are a lot of details to work out with the town council." He smiled at Lily. "I'd be honored to attend your science fair if your mom doesn't mind." Lily turned pleading eyes to Ellie, who found herself nodding despite the warning bells going off in her head. "If you're still in town, you're welcome to come." "Yay!" Lily pumped her fist in victory before hugging Daniel impulsively. "Good night, Mr. Daniel. Thanks for the chocolates and for coming to my science fair." After Lily disappeared down the hallway, a somewhat awkward silence fell between the adults. Daniel began gathering his documents while Ellie collected the empty chocolate wrappers. "You don't have to come to the science fair," she said quietly. "Lily gets excited about things, but she'll understand if you need to leave town." Daniel stopped what he was doing, looking at her directly. "I meant what I said. I'd like to go if you're comfortable with it. It's just, I don't want her to get too attached." Ellie struggled to find the right words. She doesn't have many male role models in her life. Her father's involvement is limited to birthday cards and the occasional phone call. Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes. "I see. And you're worried I'll disappear from her life too." "You will disappear," Ellie pointed out gently. "Maybe not next week, but soon. You have a company to run, a life somewhere else." Daniel was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You're right, of course. My primary residence is in Seattle, and I travel frequently for work." He hesitated. "But Harborview is only a 3-hour drive from Seattle, and this project would bring me here regularly over the next few years." The implication hung in the air between them. He wasn't just talking about attending a science fair. He was suggesting something more ongoing, more significant. "Daniel," Ellie said carefully. I think we both know that our worlds are very different. I appreciate your kindness to Lily and me, but are they really so different? He interrupted softly. I've felt more at home in this house over the past 3 days than I have anywhere in years. The simple honesty in his voice left Ellie momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, they heard Lily calling from her bedroom. Mom, I need help finding my ocean book to show Mr. Daniel tomorrow. Saved by the 10-year-old, Ellie murmured with a small smile. I should go help her settle down. Daniel nodded, gathering the last of his documents. Of course, I should be going anyway. Thank you for dinner. It was wonderful. At the front door, he paused. I meant what I said, Ellie, about feeling at home here. I don't know what that means exactly, but I'd like to find out, if you're willing. His gaze held hers, and Ellie felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble, a possibility beginning to form. Good night, Daniel, she said softly. Not quite an answer, but not quite a refusal either. After he left, Ellie leaned against the closed door, her heart beating a rapid, uncertain rhythm. Part of her wanted to believe in the possibility he was offering. Another part reminded her that fairy tales rarely came true, especially for single mothers with mounting bills and limited prospects. Yet as she moved through the house, turning off lights and checking locks, she couldn't help noticing how the spaces seemed emptier now without Daniel's presence, as if in just 3 days he had somehow become an essential part of their small world. The Harborview Community Center was packed by the time Ellie slipped through the side door. She hadn't planned to attend the town meeting. Her shift at the diner hadn't ended until 6:45, leaving her barely enough time to drop Lily at Mrs. Winter's house before hurrying over. But curiosity had gotten the better of her, along with a desire to see Daniel in his professional element. She found a spot along the back wall, nodding to familiar faces as people turned to see who had arrived late. The mayor, Bob Grayson, was at the podium introducing Daniel, who sat on the small stage looking surprisingly relaxed in a casual button-down shirt and blazer with no tie, a stark contrast to the suits he'd worn for his business meetings. Pleased to welcome Mr. Daniel Reyes, CEO of Horizon Developments International, the mayor was saying. Mr. Reyes has requested this opportunity to share his company's vision for the Cape Harbor project and to hear your thoughts and concerns directly. A smattering of applause followed as Daniel stepped up to the podium. His confident posture and easy smile projected an authority that Ellie hadn't fully appreciated before. This was a man accustomed to commanding rooms, to making multi-million-dollar decisions and leading a successful company. Thank you, Mayor Grayson, and good evening, everyone, Daniel began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you tonight, not as an outside developer, but as someone who has already come to appreciate the unique character and beauty of Harborview. His gaze swept the room and briefly landed on Ellie. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by a warm smile before he continued addressing the crowd. Many of you have likely heard rumors about our plans for the Cape Harbor property and the lighthouse. Some of those rumors might sound concerning. Talk of exclusive resorts that price out locals, environmental degradation, or the loss of public access to beloved community spaces. Murmurs swept through the audience. Ellie noticed Frank from the diner sitting a few rows from the front, arms crossed skeptically over his chest. I'm here to tell you that those aren't the kind of developments Horizon creates, Daniel continued. Let me show you what we're actually proposing. He stepped away from the podium as an assistant set up a simple easel with large mounted photographs and renderings, the same ones he'd shown Ellie the night before. There was no slick PowerPoint presentation, no corporate jargon. Instead, Daniel walked the community through each aspect of the proposed development with straightforward language and evident passion. Ellie couldn't help feeling a swell of pride as she watched him. The Daniel presenting to her neighbors was the same one who had sat at her kitchen table, thoughtful, genuine, and unexpectedly considerate of the local perspective. When he outlined the community benefits package, The library renovation, restored peer, scholarships, and guaranteed local employment opportunities. The mood in the room began to shift. Skeptical frowns gave way to interested nods, though not everyone appeared convinced. "Now," Daniel said, returning to the podium, "I want to hear from you. Your concerns, your suggestions, your hopes for Harborview's future. This isn't a done deal. It's the beginning of what I hope will be a productive conversation and partnership." Hands shot up around the room. The mayor facilitated, calling on people one by one. Marge Peterson, the librarian, was first. "These plans look lovely on paper, Mr. Reyes, but we've had developers come through before with big promises. What guarantees do we have that you'll follow through, especially on the community projects?" "A fair question," Daniel acknowledged. "We're prepared to establish a legally binding community benefits agreement with funds for the community projects held in escrow before construction on the resort begins. If we don't deliver on our promises, those funds would still be available to the town." Marge looked impressed, despite herself. Frank stood up next, not waiting to be called on. "What about local businesses? Fancy resorts like this tend to keep guests on property. How do we know you won't just siphon away tourism dollars from existing businesses?" "Another excellent point," Daniel responded, unruffled by Frank's confrontational tone. "Our research shows that integrated developments actually increase patronage of local businesses. Guests come for the resort but explore the community. We'd also feature local businesses in our concierge recommendations and shuttle guests to town regularly." He smiled. "I've personally experienced the excellent food at Sandy's Diner and would ensure all our guests know about it too." Frank looked slightly mollified, though still wary. More questions followed, about environmental protections, traffic concerns, construction noise, and lighthouse access. Daniel answered each one directly, occasionally consulting with members of his team for specific details. When he didn't have an immediate answer, he said so honestly, promising to follow up. Ellie was impressed. There was no slick evasion, no corporate doublespeak. Even when faced with hostile questions, Daniel remained respectful and thoughtful. Finally, Pete Lawson, a commercial fisherman and one of the town's most respected residents, stood up. "Mr. Reyes, I've been fishing these waters for 40 years, he said, his weathered face serious. "I've seen what happens when outsiders come in with big ideas, but I've also seen what happens when towns like ours refuse to evolve. They die slow, painful deaths as young people leave for better opportunities." The room grew quiet, everyone listening intently. "My question is simple. Why here? With your resources, you could build anywhere. Why choose our little town?" Daniel was silent for a moment, considering his response. "The easy answer is that the Cape Harbor property is physically perfect for what we want to create. Beautiful coastline, protected waters, amazing natural features," he said finally. "But the truth goes deeper than that." He set down his notes and stepped out from behind the podium, a more personal gesture. "I grew up in a coastal town not unlike this one, in Northern California. My father was a fisherman, like you, Mr. Lawson. When I was 12, a large resort development came in. They made big promises, but in the end, they priced out locals, restricted beach access, and forever changed the character of our community." A hush fell over the room. This wasn't information Ellie had seen in any of the company materials, nor had Daniel mentioned it during their conversations. "I founded Horizon Developments with a specific mission: to create environmentally and socially responsible projects that enhance communities rather than exploit them. I choose places like Harborview because I believe we can demonstrate that development doesn't have to come at the expense of community identity or natural resources." He looked around the room, his expression earnest. "I won't pretend there won't be changes. There will be. But I promise you this. Harborview's character, its natural beauty, and its accessibility to residents will be protected. That's not just a business commitment, it's a personal one." Pete Lawson studied Daniel for a long moment before giving a single, approving nod and sitting down. The meeting continued for another half hour, but the tone had shifted noticeably. When the mayor finally called an end to the questions, many residents lingered to look more closely at the plans or to speak with Daniel and his team personally. Ellie stayed near the back, watching as Daniel patiently addressed individual concerns, jotted down suggestions, and exchanged contact information with key community members. It was nearly 9 o'clock when the crowd thinned enough for him to notice her still waiting. He excused himself from a conversation and made his way to her, fatigue evident in his posture, though his smile remained genuine. "You came," he said simply. "I was curious," she admitted. "Had to see the corporate shark in action." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "And your verdict? Less shark, more, I don't know, friendly dolphin?" Daniel laughed, the sound drawing glances from the few people still milling about. "I'll take that as a compliment. What did you really think?" "I think you impressed a lot of people tonight, including some who came ready to hate everything you had to say." She hesitated. "You never mentioned your father was a fisherman." Something flickered in his eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "It's not something I usually share in business contexts. People make assumptions that you're not really a polished CEO if they know you come from a working-class background." "Something like that," he acknowledged. "The business world can be judgmental. Well, it worked here. Pete Lawson's approval carries a lot of weight." "I wasn't saying it to win approval," Daniel said quietly. "It's the truth." The sincerity in his voice touched something in Ellie. Here was yet another layer to the complex man who had crashed into her life just days ago, a man with roots not so different from her own. The mayor approached before she could respond. "Daniel, the council members would like a quick word before they leave, if you don't mind." "Of course," Daniel agreed, then turned back to Ellie. "Can I call you later, or stop by?" She shook her head. "It's already past Lily's bedtime, and I should relieve Mrs. Winters, but I'll see you at the science fair tomorrow?" "Wouldn't miss it," he assured her. Then, with a quick glance to ensure the mayor was out of earshot, he added, "There's something else I'd like to talk to you about, an idea I've been working on." Curiosity piqued, Ellie raised an eyebrow. "Business or personal?" A slow smile spread across his face. "Let's say it's where the two intersect." Before she could press for details, the mayor called Daniel's name again, more insistently this time. "Tomorrow," Daniel promised, giving her arm a gentle squeeze before heading back to his official duties. As Ellie walked home through the quiet streets of Harborview, her mind replayed the evening. Daniel had been impressive, yes, but it was the glimpse of his background that kept returning to her thoughts. The son of a fisherman who had built an international development company but hadn't forgotten his roots. Maybe their worlds weren't as different as she'd assumed. Or maybe she was just looking for reasons to justify the growing attraction she felt, an attraction that became harder to deny with each encounter. When she arrived at Mrs. Winters' house, she found the elderly woman and Lily on the couch, heads bent over a large book about marine conservation. "Mom," Lily exclaimed, "how was the boring meeting? Did Mr. Daniel talk about the research center again? Mrs. Winters says it might have touch pools where you can feel real starfish." "The meeting wasn't boring at all," Ellie replied, exchanging a knowing glance with Mrs. Winters. "And yes, Mr. Daniel talked about the research center. I think a lot of people are starting to get excited about it." Mrs. Winters gathered her knitting as Lily collected her things. "Your Mr. Daniel certainly has the town buzzing," she said quietly to Ellie. "Haven't seen this much excitement since they filmed that commercial for the state lottery at the lighthouse 2 summers ago." "He's not my Mr. Daniel," Ellie protested automatically, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Mrs. Winters just smiled, the kind of smile that suggested she knew more than she was saying. "Whatever you say, dear, but a word of advice from someone who's seen a lot of life. When something unexpected but wonderful drops into your lap, don't overthink it. Sometimes the universe knows what we need better than we do." With that enigmatic statement, she ushered them out the door, leaving Ellie to wonder if the entire town was conspiring to push her and Daniel together, or if perhaps the universe really was trying to tell her something she'd been too cautious to hear. Harborview Elementary School buzzed with the controlled chaos of the annual science fair. Handmade posters lined the gymnasium walls. Proud parents navigated the narrow aisles between display tables, and excited children explained their projects with varying degrees of scientific accuracy. The air smelled of glue sticks, construction paper, and the cookies baking in the cafeteria for the post-fair reception. Ellie helped Lily make final adjustments to her display, which stood out among the typical volcanoes and solar system models. Lily had created a functional water filtration system designed specifically to capture microplastics, complete with before and after water samples and a microscope borrowed from her science teacher to show the captured particles. "Do you think Mr. Daniel will really come?" Lily asked for the third time, her eyes constantly darting to the gymnasium entrance. What if he's too busy with his important meetings? "He said he would be here," Ellie replied, trying to project more confidence than she felt. Despite Daniel's assurances, she knew how easily business emergencies could arise. "And if something comes up, I'm sure he'll let us know." Ms. Reynolds, Lily's science teacher, stopped by their table. "This is quite impressive, Lily," she said, examining the filtration system. "Did you come up with this design yourself?" Lily nodded eagerly. "I read about different filters in my ocean conservation book, but they were all too expensive or complicated. So I combined parts from a Brita filter, some special mesh Mom found at the craft store, and activated charcoal. The charcoal catches chemicals and the mesh traps the plastic bits." "Very resourceful," Ms. Reynolds said, genuinely impressed. "You could be a real environmental engineer someday." "That's what Mr. Daniel said," Lily exclaimed. "He knows all about ocean stuff because he studied marine biology before he became a businessman." The teacher raised an eyebrow, looking at Ellie. "Mr. Daniel?" "A friend," Ellie explained vaguely. "He's in town for business and has been encouraging Lily's interest in marine conservation." Before Ms. Reynolds could inquire further, Lily's face lit up as she looked past them. "He's here." Ellie turned to see Daniel making his way through the crowded gymnasium. He'd clearly come directly from a meeting, still wearing a suit, though he'd loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar. He carried what looked like a small gift bag and was smiling as he spotted them. Heads turned as he passed. It wasn't just his well-tailored suit or his obvious good looks that drew attention. It was the confident way he moved, the subtle aura of authority that seemed to part the crowd before him. "Mr. Daniel," Lily called, waving enthusiastically. "You came." "Of course I did," he replied, reaching their table. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." His gaze shifted to Ellie, warming in a way that made her heart skip. "Hello, Ellie." "Hi," she said, suddenly feeling like a teenager with a crush. "Glad you could make it." "Sorry I'm a bit late. Conference call ran over." He turned his attention to Lily's display. "Now, tell me all about this amazing filtration system." Lily launched into her prepared presentation with the energy and enthusiasm only a 10-year-old passionate about saving the oceans could muster. Daniel listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was taking her work seriously. "So the mesh catches particles as small as 2 millimeters, he clarified, examining the filter. "Yes. And look," Lily gestured to the microscope. "You can see all the yucky bits it filtered out of just 1 liter of harbor water." Daniel bent to look through the microscope, his expression growing serious. "That's a significant amount of microplastic debris. Have you taken samples from different locations?" Lily nodded eagerly. 3 spots. The harbor has the most, then the public beach, and least near the lighthouse, but there's still some everywhere. "Fascinating work, Lily. Truly impressive." He straightened up, something calculating in his expression, the businessman momentarily visible beneath the friendly exterior. Ms. Reynolds, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward to introduce herself. "I'm Karen Reynolds, Lily's science teacher. She mentioned you have a background in marine biology? Daniel Reyes, he replied, shaking her hand. And yes, undergraduate degree before I went to business school. The ocean has always been a passion of mine. Recognition dawned on the teacher's face. Reyes, you're the developer everyone's been talking about. The eco-resort? Guilty as charged, Daniel admitted with a smile. Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Daniels' project is going to have a big research center where scientists study ocean pollution, Lily interjected proudly, and he said local students might get to help. Is that so? The teacher looked at Daniel with new interest. Our environmental science curriculum could certainly benefit from real-world research opportunities. We should talk about potential partnerships, Daniel suggested. Educational outreach is a key component of our plan. As they discussed possibilities, Ellie noticed several parents watching with undisguised curiosity. Whispers traveled through the gymnasium, and she caught fragments. The developer, with Ellie Morgan, didn't know they were. She felt her cheeks warm under the scrutiny. The judging began soon after, with Lily confidently explaining her project to the panel of teachers and local scientists. Daniel stood back with Ellie, watching proudly. She's remarkable, he said quietly, so articulate and passionate. She gets very focused when she cares about something, Ellie replied, unable to keep the pride from her voice. Ocean conservation has been her thing since she was 6 and found a seagull tangled in plastic rings. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. That focus is a rare quality, especially in someone so young. He hesitated, then added, Actually, that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about. The mysterious business meets personal idea you mentioned? Yes. He glanced around at the crowded gymnasium. Though perhaps somewhere quieter would be better for that conversation. The cafeteria is setting up refreshments, Ellie suggested. It should be relatively quiet until judging finishes. They made their way through the crowd, several people nodding or waving to Ellie as they passed. She noticed Frank from the diner with his grandchildren, his eyebrows rising significantly as he spotted her with Daniel. The cafeteria was indeed quieter, with only a few parent volunteers arranging cookies and punch on long tables. They found a spot in a corner, away from the activity. So, Ellie prompted, curiosity getting the better of her, what's this idea where business and personal intersect? Daniel leaned forward, his expression animated. Lily's filtration system, it's ingenious in its simplicity. Basic materials, effective design, easily reproducible. Do you realize what that could mean? Ellie blinked, caught off guard by his enthusiasm. I'm not sure I follow. Most microplastic filtering systems are expensive and complex, requiring specialized equipment, but Lily's design could be reproduced by anyone with access to basic materials. He pulled out his phone, showing her notes he'd apparently been taking during Lily's presentation. With some refinements, this could be implemented in communities around the world, especially in developing areas where sophisticated technology isn't available. You're saying Lily's science project could have real-world applications? Exactly, and I want to include it in our Marine Research Center. Not just the concept, but Lily herself. We could develop an educational program around it, with her as a student consultant. Ellie stared at him, processing this unexpected proposal. You want my 10-year-old daughter to consult on your multi-million-dollar development project? With proper academic supervision, of course, Daniel clarified quickly. And with you involved every step of the way. We'd provide a stipend for her time and credit her fully for the innovation. Ellie's first instinct was skepticism. This sounded too good to be true, the kind of thing adults sometimes said to children to encourage them without real intention of follow-through. But Daniel's expression was entirely earnest, his excitement genuine. This wasn't just flattery or an attempt to impress her. He truly saw potential in Lily's work. You're serious, she said, realization dawning. Completely serious. He hesitated, then added more softly, Ellie, I've built my career on recognizing valuable innovations and the people behind them. Lily has a gift. I'd want to support that regardless of—" He gestured vaguely between them. "Whatever this is developing between us." The frank acknowledgement of their growing connection caught her off guard. Before she could respond, a commotion near the cafeteria entrance drew their attention. "Dad!" Lily's excited voice carried across the room. "You came!" Ellie froze, her blood running cold as she turned to see her ex-husband, Tom, standing awkwardly by the door, Lily bouncing excitedly in front of him. "Tom," she whispered, shock giving way to confusion. "What is he doing here?" Daniel glanced between Ellie and the newcomer, quickly connecting the dots. "Your ex?" Ellie nodded, already rising from her seat. Tom Morgan hadn't attended a single school event since the divorce, not even Lily's kindergarten graduation. His sudden appearance now, just as her life was becoming wonderfully complicated, felt like more than mere coincidence. Tom looked much the same, sandy hair, athletic build, the boyish smile that had once made her heart race but now only stirred resentment. He was dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, a stark contrast to Daniel's tailored suit. "Ellie," Tom greeted as she approached, his smile faltering slightly. "Surprise." "What are you doing here?" she asked, keeping her voice low to avoid creating a scene. "You didn't mention anything about visiting when you called last month." "Last-minute decision," he replied with the easy nonchalance that had once charmed her and now grated on her nerves. "Had a job fall through in Portland, thought I'd stop by and see the kiddo. Her science thing was on the calendar you sent." "Her science thing," Ellie repeated flatly. "You mean the science fair she's been working toward for months? The one she specifically invited you to 3 weeks ago, and you said you couldn't make it?" Tom had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Plans change, Elle. I thought you'd be happy I made the effort." Before Ellie could respond, Lily reappeared, dragging Tom by the hand. "Dad, you have to see my project. I made a filter that catches tiny plastic bits in the water, and I want you to meet Mr. Daniel." Tom's eyebrows rose as he noticed Daniel approaching behind Ellie. "Mr. Daniel." "Daniel Reyes," Daniel introduced himself, extending a hand with professional courtesy. "Nice to meet you." "Tom Morgan," Tom replied, shaking Daniel's hand with a slightly too firm grip. "Lily's father." The tension was palpable as the two men sized each other up. Tom, despite his casual attire, straightened to his full height, which still left him a couple of inches shorter than Daniel. Daniel, for his part, maintained a pleasant expression that revealed nothing of his thoughts. "Mr. Daniel knows all about ocean stuff," Lily was saying, oblivious to the awkward dynamics. "And he's building a research center where scientists can study pollution, and he thinks my filter idea might actually work for real places." Tom's expression hardened slightly. "Is that so? And what exactly do you do, Mr. Daniel?" "I'm a developer," Daniel replied simply, "currently working on an eco-resort and marine research facility here in Harborview." "A developer," Tom repeated, something unpleasant in his tone. His gaze shifted to Ellie, a question in his eyes. "Lily, why don't you take your dad to see your project?" Ellie suggested, wanting to defuse the situation. "The judges should be done by now." "Okay," Lily agreed happily, tugging at Tom's arm. "Come on, Dad." Tom allowed himself to be led away, but not before giving Daniel another measuring look and saying to Ellie, "We should talk later. I'm staying the weekend." As they walked away, Ellie let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I'm sorry about that. He's never shown up unannounced before." Daniel's expression was carefully neutral. "No need to apologize. He's Lily's father. He has every right to attend her school events." "It's not that simple," Ellie sighed. "Tom has a pattern of swooping in when it suits him, making grand promises, then disappearing again when responsibility becomes inconvenient. Lily gets her hopes up every time, and I'm the one who has to pick up the pieces." Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes. That's why you're concerned about Lily getting attached to me." Ellie nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. "I need to be careful about who I let into her life. She's been hurt enough." Daniel was quiet for a moment, his gaze following Tom and Lily across the cafeteria. "For what it's worth," he finally said, "I understand. And whatever happens between us, I would never make promises to Lily that I don't intend to keep." The sincerity in his voice touched Ellie deeply. Before she could respond, the announcement came that judging was complete, and everyone should return to the gymnasium for the awards. As they made their way back, Daniel gently touched her elbow. "We'll talk more about the research center idea later. For now, let's focus on Lily's big moment." Ellie nodded gratefully, though her mind was in turmoil. Tom's unexpected appearance had thrown her off balance, reminding her of past mistakes and broken trust. Yet walking beside Daniel, feeling his steady presence beside her, she couldn't help but contrast the two men, one who had walked away from responsibility and one who seemed to embrace it wholeheartedly. The question was whether she was brave enough to trust again, to believe that sometimes people really were as good as they seemed. First prize in environmental sciences goes to Lily Morgan for her microplastic filtration system. The gymnasium erupted in applause as Lily's face transformed with shock and delight. She bounced on her toes for a moment before racing to the front to accept her blue ribbon and certificate from the principal. "Thank you," she said breathlessly into the microphone. "I want to save our oceans because they're the most important ecosystem on Earth, and plastic pollution is killing marine animals every day. My filter is just the beginning. I'm going to keep working on it and make it better." The sincerity and determination in her voice brought smiles to the faces of everyone in the audience. Ellie felt tears spring to her eyes. Pride, love, and a fierce protectiveness all mingled together as she watched her daughter shine. When Lily returned to their spot, clutching her ribbon and certificate, she was immediately enveloped in a three-way hug between Ellie, Tom, and Daniel, an awkward configuration that mirrored the complicated dynamics at play. "That's my girl!" Tom exclaimed, ruffling Lily's hair. "Smart as a whip, just like your old man." Ellie bit back a retort about Tom's academic achievements or lack thereof. This was Lily's moment, and she wouldn't taint it with old resentments. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," she said instead, squeezing Lily's shoulder. "Congratulations, Lily," Daniel added warmly. "Absolutely well-deserved." As the crowd began dispersing toward the cafeteria for refreshments, Ms. Reynolds approached their group. "Congratulations, Lily!" the teacher exclaimed. "The judges were particularly impressed by the practical applications of your design. I'd like to display your project at the District Science Showcase next month if that's all right with you." "Really?" Lily's eyes widened. "That would be amazing." "We'll need to talk logistics," Ms. Reynolds continued, turning to Ellie. "The showcase is in Portland, so there would be transportation to arrange." "I can take her," Tom interrupted, draping an arm casually around Lily's shoulders. "I've got connections in Portland. Could make a whole weekend of it, right, kiddo?" Ellie saw the hope bloom on Lily's face and felt her heart sink. How many times had Tom made similar promises, only to cancel at the last minute because something more interesting came up? "That's very kind," Ms. Reynolds replied, clearly sensing the tension. "But there's plenty of time to sort out the details. For now, let's celebrate today's success." As the teacher moved on to speak with other students, Lily tugged at Daniel's sleeve. "Do you really think my filter could work for real ocean cleaning, Mr. Daniel? Or were you just being nice?" Daniel crouched slightly to meet her at eye level, his expression serious. "I absolutely meant it, Lily. With some refinements and proper testing, your design has real potential. It's innovative precisely because it's simple and accessible." Tom frowned, looking between his daughter and Daniel. "Hold on. What's this about?" "Mr. Daniel thinks my filter could be used in his research center," Lily explained excitedly. And maybe even in other places where people need to clean water but don't have fancy equipment. Your research center? Tom directed the question at Daniel, his tone skeptical. Part of the Cape Harbor Development Project, Daniel explained smoothly. We're planning a marine research facility focused on ocean conservation with educational programs for local students. And you're interested in my daughter's science project. It wasn't quite a question, and the implication was clear in Tom's voice. Daniel straightened, meeting the other man's gaze directly. I'm interested in innovative solutions to environmental problems. Lily has created something with genuine potential. How convenient that it's my ex-wife's daughter who caught your attention, Tom said with a humorless smile. Dad, Lily interjected, sounding hurt and confused. Mr. Daniel knows lots about ocean science. He studied it in college. I'm sure he did, sweetheart, Tom replied, not taking his eyes off Daniel. I'm just curious about his interest in our family. The emphasis on "our" was unmistakable. Ellie felt heat rise to her cheeks, partly embarrassment, partly anger at Tom's territorial display. This isn't the time or place for this discussion, she said firmly. Lily just won first prize. Let's focus on celebrating her achievement. Daniel nodded, his professional composure firmly in place despite the obvious tension. Absolutely. Congratulations again, Lily. I should let you celebrate with your parents. He glanced at his watch. I have a late meeting to prepare for anyway. Disappointment crossed Lily's face. You're leaving? Just for tonight, he assured her with a gentle smile. But I'll be in touch about your project if that's okay with your mom. Of course it is, Lily exclaimed before Ellie could respond. Right, Mom? We can talk about it, Ellie hedged, very aware of Tom watching the exchange with narrowed eyes. Daniel nodded, understanding her caution. I'll call you tomorrow, he said to Ellie, then shook Tom's hand briefly. Good to meet you, Tom. You have an exceptional daughter. With that, he made his exit, navigating through the crowd with the same quiet confidence he'd shown upon arrival, though Ellie thought she detected a new tension in his shoulders. So, Tom said once Daniel was out of earshot, that's why you're suddenly interested in development projects. Got yourself a fancy boyfriend. He's not my boyfriend, Ellie replied automatically, though the denial felt hollow. And my interest in the project is because it affects our town. Our town? I thought it was just your town these days, Tom countered with a smirk. Since when did you start including me again? Can we get cookies now? Lily interrupted, either oblivious to or deliberately cutting through the tension between her parents. I'm starving! The cafeteria was crowded with families celebrating their children's achievements. Ellie watched as Lily proudly showed her ribbon to friends and accepted congratulations from neighbors. Tom stayed close, playing the role of the devoted father, as if he hadn't missed the last 3 years of school events. So what's the deal with you and the developer? Tom asked in a low voice as they stood by the refreshment table. Seems pretty cozy for someone you just met. Ellie sighed. It's complicated. Always is with you, Tom replied with a knowing look that made her bristle. What's that supposed to mean? Just that you never do anything the simple way. Dating a guy who's planning to transform your precious town? That's classic conflicted Ellie. The observation hit uncomfortably close to home, but Ellie refused to give Tom the satisfaction of knowing it. Why are you really here, Tom? Because it wasn't to see Lily's science project. You've missed plenty of those before. Tom's casual demeanor slipped slightly. Maybe I'm trying to be more involved. Ever think of that? After 7 years of minimal effort, what changed? He hesitated, glancing around to ensure Lily was still occupied with her friends. I'm moving back to Oregon, he finally admitted. Got a job offer in Portland. Good money, stability. The news hit Ellie like a physical blow. Tom, back in Oregon, after years of him being safely distant in California, The thought of him nearby, potentially disrupting the careful routine she'd built for herself and Lily, was unsettling. When? Next month. I've already found an apartment. He took a sip of punch, watching her over the rim of his cup. Figured it was time to be more present in Lily's life. She's growing up fast. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I might be seeing someone new? Ellie couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Tom had the grace to look slightly abashed. Okay, maybe seeing your Facebook update about the exciting new development project and finding some rich guy's name tagged made me curious. Sue me for Googling him. He shrugged. Forbes 40 under 40 list? CEO of a company worth $500 million? That's quite a step up from a building contractor, Elle. That's not… Ellie began, then stopped herself. Explaining that her relationship with Daniel wasn't about his money would only validate Tom's implication that there was a relationship to discuss. It doesn't matter. If you're serious about being more involved in Lily's life, that's good. But it needs to be consistent, Tom. Not just when it's convenient or when you're feeling territorial. I'm committed this time, he insisted. And for a moment, Ellie glimpsed the earnest young man she'd fallen for all those years ago. The Portland job is permanent. I want to make up for lost time with Lily. Before Ellie could respond, Lily bounded back to them, a chocolate chip cookie in each hand. Dad, you have to meet my friend Emma. She got second place in Earth Sciences and her dad's a fisherman just like Mr. Daniel's dad was. Tom's eyebrows rose slightly at this piece of information, but he allowed himself to be pulled away, leaving Ellie alone with her thoughts and a plastic cup of lukewarm punch. The revelation about Tom moving back to Oregon had thrown her off balance. While she'd always wished Lily could have a more consistent relationship with her father, the timing seemed suspiciously connected to Daniel's appearance in their lives. Speaking of Daniel, her phone buzzed with a text message. Sorry for the abrupt departure. Didn't want to complicate things with Lily's father. Congratulations again to our brilliant young scientist. Still want to discuss the project when things settle down. Call me anytime. The considerateness of the message warmed her heart. Daniel had removed himself from a potentially volatile situation not out of discomfort but to make things easier for her and Lily. It was exactly the kind of thoughtfulness that kept drawing her to him, despite all her reservations. The cafeteria was beginning to empty, families drifting out with tired but happy children. Tom returned with Lily, who was practically bouncing with excitement. Dad says I can stay up late tonight since it's a special occasion, she announced. And he's going to take us to breakfast tomorrow at the pancake place by the harbor. Ellie shot Tom a look. They hadn't discussed any of these plans, but he just smiled innocently. I thought I'd crash on your couch tonight if that's okay, he said. Save the hotel money and spend more time with the kiddo. It was a calculated move, and they both knew it. Refusing would make Ellie look petty in front of Lily, while agreeing meant enduring an evening of Tom's presence in the home she'd built without him. Fine, she said tersely, but we're not staying up too late. It's already past bedtime. The drive home was filled with Lily's excited chatter, recounting every detail of the judge's comments and planning what improvements she could make to her filter design. Tom encouraged her enthusiasm, making the occasional comment that revealed how little he knew about his daughter's passions and interests. When they arrived at the house, Lily insisted on giving Tom a tour, proudly showing off her room with its ocean-themed decorations and the shelf of special items, including Daniel's snow globe, which Tom examined with poorly disguised curiosity. Mr. Daniel gave me that, Lily explained happily. He said it reminded him of our beach. Did he now? Tom murmured, setting the globe down carefully. Seems like Mr. Daniel is quite the gift giver. After Lily had finally been convinced to go to bed, considerably later than her normal bedtime thanks to Tom's permissiveness, Ellie found herself alone in the kitchen with her ex-husband, an uncomfortable echo of their married life. Nice place you've made here, Tom said, leaning against the counter as she washed the few dishes left in the sink. Cozy. It works for us, Ellie replied neutrally. Tom was quiet for a moment, watching her. You know, I always thought you'd eventually leave this town. Go back to school, maybe. You were so smart, had so many plans." The observation, unexpected in its perceptiveness, caught Ellie off guard. Plans change when you have a child to raise alone. "You didn't have to do it alone," Tom said quietly. "You chose to stay here, 3,000 miles from my job." Ellie set down the dish she was washing, turning to face him. "Are you seriously trying to rewrite history right now? You left us, Tom. You said, and I quote, 'I'm not cut out for the family man routine.' You moved to California for a construction job that lasted all of 6 months, and then just kept finding reasons not to come back." "I was 25 and terrified," Tom admitted, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it brought back a flood of memories. "I made mistakes, big ones, but I'm trying to make it right now." Ellie studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Why now? Really?" Tom sighed, his cocky facade slipping. "Because I saw Lily's picture on your Facebook standing by that science project looking so grown up, and I realized I've missed everything. Her first day of school, losing her baby teeth, learning to ride a bike, all of it." He swallowed hard. "And then I saw you tagged with some CEO, looking happier than you ever did with me, and I thought, if I don't step up now, someone else will become her father in all the ways that matter." There was raw honesty in his voice that Ellie hadn't heard in years. Part of her sympathized with his regret. Another part, the part that had cried herself to sleep for months after he left, the part that had struggled to pay bills and explain to a 3-year-old why Daddy wasn't coming home, hardened against it. "It's late," she said finally. "There are extra blankets in the hall closet. The couch isn't comfortable, but it's better than a hotel." Tom began, reaching for her arm. She stepped back, out of his reach. "Good night, Tom." In her bedroom, door firmly closed, Ellie sat on the edge of her bed and pulled out her phone. There was another text from Daniel. "Just heard from Jason that the town council's preliminary vote on our proposal is Monday. Would love your input on the community presentation before then. Dinner tomorrow night? Just us? Just us." 2 simple words that shouldn't have made her heart race, yet they did. Despite Tom's unexpected reappearance, despite all the complications and warnings her practical mind kept raising, Ellie found herself typing a response. "Dinner sounds perfect. Lot to talk about. Tom's watching Lily tomorrow evening, so I'm free." She hesitated only briefly before pressing send. Whatever was developing between her and Daniel deserved a chance to grow without Tom's shadow looming over it. And after all the years of putting everyone else first, Lily, her customers at the diner, even the memory of a husband who had chosen to leave, maybe it was finally time to pursue something that brought her joy. As she got ready for bed, Ellie could hear Tom moving around in the living room, the sounds so familiar yet so foreign now. Once, they had been a family. Then they weren't. And now, with Tom back in Oregon and Daniel entering their lives, everything felt uncertain again. But uncertainty, she reminded herself as she slipped under the covers, wasn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it was just the universe making room for something new. The morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains as Ellie prepared breakfast, the familiar routine somehow altered by Tom's presence at her table. He sat across from Lily, listening with apparent fascination as she explained her plans for improving her filtration system. "I need to figure out how to process more water without clogging the filters," Lily was saying, gesturing with her spoon and nearly splattering milk from her cereal bowl. "Maybe a series of progressively finer meshes?" "Sounds complicated," Tom replied, clearly out of his depth but making an effort. "Your mom says this Daniel guy wants to use your design in his project?" Ellie tensed slightly as she flipped a pancake. She hadn't mentioned that to Tom. "Uh-huh," Lily nodded enthusiastically. "For the Marine Research Center. He thinks it could help communities that can't afford expensive equipment." "And what does he get out of it?" Tom asked, his tone casual but his question pointed. "Tom," Ellie warned quietly. He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just asking. Businessmen usually have angles. He gets to help save the oceans, Lily stated with the simple certainty of a child. That's what he wants. He studied marine biology before he was a CEO. Tom looked skeptical but dropped the subject as Ellie placed a stack of pancakes on the table. So, kiddo, what do you want to do today? We've got the whole day together. Lily's eyes lit up. Can we go to the tide pools? Low tide is at 10:30 and there might be sea stars and anemones. I can show you where I collected my water samples. Tide pools it is, Tom agreed, though Ellie could tell outdoor exploration wasn't exactly his idea of fun. He'd always been more of an indoor person, preferring sports bars to hiking trails. Just be back by 4, Ellie interjected. I need to get ready for my plans tonight. Hot date with the developer? Tom asked with a smirk. Mom's having dinner with Mr. Daniel, Lily supplied helpfully, oblivious to the tension between her parents. They're going to talk about important project stuff. Is that what they're calling it these days? Tom murmured, just loud enough for Ellie to hear. She chose to ignore the comment, focusing instead on making sure Lily remembered to bring sunscreen and a jacket for the tide pools. The last thing she needed was for her daughter to come home sunburned or chilled because Tom hadn't thought about practical matters. By the time they left for their excursion, Ellie was exhausted from the effort of maintaining a civil atmosphere. Tom's presence in her home felt like an invasion, a disruption of the peaceful life she'd carefully constructed. Yet seeing Lily's excitement at spending time with her father made the discomfort worthwhile. Alone in the house for the first time in what felt like days, Ellie sank onto the couch with a cup of coffee, trying to sort through her conflicted feelings. Tom's revelation that he was moving back to Oregon had thrown her. For years, she'd wished he would take a more active role in Lily's life, but now that it was happening, she found herself resentful of the timing and his presumption. And then there was Daniel. Kind, thoughtful Daniel with his genuine interest in Lily's project and his respectful consideration of Ellie's feelings. The contrast between the two men couldn't be more stark. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel. Looking forward to tonight. I've made reservations at Maria in Bayport at 7. Is that okay? I can pick you up at 6:30. Maria was the finest restaurant within 50 miles, known for its elegant atmosphere and exquisite seafood. It was the kind of place Ellie had never even considered visiting, the kind of place where a waitress's monthly salary might cover one dinner for 2. Sounds lovely, she texted back, but perhaps a bit fancy. I don't have anything appropriate to wear. His response came quickly. You'd look beautiful in anything, but if you're uncomfortable, we can go somewhere else. The little Italian place on Harbor Street? The thoughtfulness of his response, offering an alternative without question, made her smile. Italian sounds perfect. See you at 6:30. With several hours to herself, Ellie did something she rarely allowed herself time for. She pampered herself. A long shower, hair carefully styled instead of pulled back in her usual practical ponytail, and makeup applied with more attention than she'd given it in years. Her wardrobe options were limited, but she eventually settled on a simple teal dress she'd bought for a friend's wedding 2 years ago. It wasn't designer fashion, but it fit well and brought out the green in her eyes. By the time Daniel's car pulled into her driveway at exactly 6:30, Ellie felt more like herself than she had since Tom's unexpected arrival, or perhaps more accurately, more like the self she rarely had time to be. Daniel stepped out of the car, and Ellie caught her breath. He was dressed in dark slacks and a light blue button-down shirt, casual yet polished. But it was his expression when he saw her that made her heart skip, a look of genuine appreciation that had nothing to do with the modesty of her dress or the simplicity of her home. You look beautiful, he said simply as she opened the door. Thank you, she replied, feeling a flush of pleasure at the compliment. You clean up pretty well yourself. His smile widened. I try, shall we? The drive to Antonio's, the Italian restaurant on Harbor Street, was pleasant, filled with easy conversation about their days. Daniel described a meeting with the environmental assessment team, while Ellie shared anecdotes from the breakfast rush at the diner. "Frank asked about you," she mentioned as they neared the restaurant. "He seems to be warming up to the development idea, especially after hearing about the local hiring commitments." "That's good to hear," Daniel replied. "Community support is crucial for this project." Antonio's was a local favorite, a family-owned establishment with checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, and the best homemade pasta north of Portland. The owner, Antonio himself, greeted them warmly at the door. "Ah, Ms. Morgan, so lovely to see you here," he exclaimed, his Italian accent still strong despite 30 years in Oregon. "And Mr. Reyes, your reservation is ready, the best table as requested." He led them to a corner table partially secluded by a latticework covered with artificial grapevines, private without being isolated. A bottle of wine was already breathing on the table. "Your wine, sir, the Barolo you specified," Antonio said with a slight bow. "I will give you a few moments with the menus." Once seated, Daniel looked slightly embarrassed. "I hope this is okay. I called ahead to make some arrangements." "It's perfect," Ellie assured him, genuinely pleased. Antonio's was upscale by Harborview standards, but not intimidatingly so. "I've always loved this place, but rarely have a reason to come." "Well, I hope tonight is a good reason," Daniel said, his eyes warm in the candlelight. The evening progressed with a natural ease that surprised Ellie. They shared antipasti and handmade pasta, the conversation flowing as smoothly as the excellent wine. Daniel asked thoughtful questions about her life in Harborview, her dreams for Lily's future, and even her own deferred ambitions. "I always wanted to go back to school," she admitted after the main course had been cleared. "I was studying marine biology too, actually, when I got pregnant with Lily. Just community college courses, but I loved it." "That explains Lily's passion for ocean conservation," Daniel observed. "She comes by it honestly." "She does," Ellie agreed. "I tried to keep that connection to the ocean alive for her, even when other things fell apart." Daniel hesitated, then asked gently, "Like your marriage?" Ellie nodded, swirling the wine in her glass. "Tom and I were too young in retrospect. High school sweethearts who got married right after graduation because it seemed like the next step. When I got pregnant a year later, he panicked. Stuck around until Lily was 3, then decided family life wasn't for him. And now he's back," Daniel stated, not a question. "Yes, moving to Portland next month, apparently." She met his gaze directly. "He says he wants to be more involved in Lily's life. How do you feel about that?" The simple question, asked with genuine interest rather than judgment, opened a floodgate. Ellie found herself sharing feelings she'd barely acknowledged even to herself. Her anger at Tom's convenient timing, her concern about Lily getting hurt again, her fear of disruption to the stable life she'd worked so hard to create. Daniel listened attentively, offering neither platitudes nor advice, just his full attention. When she finally ran out of words, he reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said quietly. The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to her eyes, which she blinked away quickly. "I'm sorry. This was supposed to be a nice dinner, not a therapy session." "It is a nice dinner," Daniel assured her. "Getting to know you better, all of you, not just the parts that are easy to share. That's what I want." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Ellie turned her hand under his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Your turn," she said after a moment. "Tell me something I don't know about Daniel Reyes." He smiled slightly, then grew serious. "Well, you know about my father, the fisherman. What I didn't mention is that he died when I was 15. Heart attack on his boat. My mother had already passed years earlier, cancer, so I went to live with my uncle in Seattle." "I'm so sorry," Ellie said softly. Daniel nodded his acknowledgement. "My uncle was a real estate developer. Very old school. Profit above all else. I worked for him through high school and college, learning the business. When I finally earned my MBA and started Horizon, he was furious that I wanted to focus on sustainable development. Said I was throwing away good money on environmental nonsense. But you proved him wrong, Ellie guessed. Eventually. The first few years were touch and go. I nearly went bankrupt twice trying to convince investors that eco-friendly development could be profitable. Now those same investors can't throw money at us fast enough. He smiled wryly. Success has a way of changing people's minds. Is that why the Cape Harbor project is so important to you? Ellie asked, perceiving that there was more to the story. Daniel's expression softened. Partly, but also because he hesitated. This coastline reminds me of home. The real home before the developers came and changed everything. When I found the Cape Harbor property, I saw a chance to do development right, to prove that progress doesn't have to come at the expense of community or environment. As he spoke, Ellie could see the passion behind his business persona, the deep commitment to creating something meaningful that went beyond profit margins and investor returns. It's never just business for you, is it? She observed. No, he admitted. Though I try to maintain professional distance, it's not always easy. His gaze held hers, and Ellie understood he wasn't just talking about the Cape Harbor project anymore. The rest of dinner passed in a pleasant blur of tiramisu, espresso, and conversation that ranged from Lily's science project to favorite books to childhood memories. By the time Daniel drove her home, Ellie felt as though she'd known him for years rather than days. He walked her to the door, where they paused in the soft glow of the porch light. From inside, Ellie could hear the faint sound of the television. Tom was still up, probably waiting to question her about her evening. I had a wonderful time, Daniel said softly. So did I, Ellie replied, suddenly shy despite the easy intimacy they'd shared over dinner. Daniel moved closer, his hand gently touching her cheek. I'd like to kiss you, he said, his voice low. If that's okay. The simple request, so respectful of her boundaries, made Ellie's heart swell. In answer, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Daniel's arms encircled her. Ellie felt herself melting into him, all the tension and worry of the past days dissolving in the warmth of his embrace. It felt right in a way nothing had in years, perhaps ever. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he murmured reluctantly. Town council meeting early tomorrow. The vote on your proposal, Ellie remembered. Yes, the preliminary vote at least. He straightened, still holding her hands in his. Would you come? It's at 10 a.m. at Town Hall. The invitation surprised her. You want me there? I do, he said simply. Whatever happens with the vote, I'd like you to be part of it. The implication was clear. He wasn't just asking her to witness a business milestone, he was inviting her to share something important to him, to be a part of his life beyond their private dinners and conversations. Before Ellie could respond, the front door swung open, revealing Tom backlit by the living room lamp. He leaned against the door frame, his expression a forced casualness that didn't hide his evident displeasure at the scene before him. Evening, folks, he said with false cheerfulness. Nice night for a porch chat. Ellie and Daniel stepped apart, though Daniel kept one hand lightly on the small of her back, a subtle but clear statement. Hello, Tom, Daniel replied evenly. How were the tide pools? Wet, rocky, full of slimy things. Tom's smile didn't reach his eyes. Lily had a blast, though. She's got quite the scientific mind, takes after her mother. She certainly does, Daniel agreed. An awkward silence fell, broken only when Ellie cleared her throat. It's getting late. I should check on Lily. I'll see you tomorrow? Daniel asked, the question directed solely at her despite Tom's looming presence. Yes, she decided in that moment. 10 o'clock. I'll be there. Daniel smiled, the warmth of it reaching his eyes even in the dim porch light. Good night, Ellie. He nodded politely to Tom. Good night, Tom. As Daniel walked back to his car, Tom moved aside to let Ellie enter the house. So, he said, closing the door behind them. That looked cozy. I'm not discussing this with you, Ellie replied firmly, hanging up her purse. How's Lily? Asleep, knocked out around 9 after chattering for hours about every creature we saw at the tide pools. His expression softened. She's amazing, Elle. So smart, so curious about everything. Yes, she is, Ellie agreed, a momentary truce forming around their shared appreciation of their daughter. The developer seems pretty taken with you, Tom observed, the truce apparently short-lived. And with Lily. Ellie sighed, too happy from her evening with Daniel to let Tom's comments bother her. His name is Daniel, and yes, he cares about both of us. Known him what? A week? Tom raised an eyebrow. Seems fast. Sometimes you just know when something's right, Ellie replied, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Tom studied her for a moment, something like genuine regret crossing his features. I remember you looking at me that way once. The simple statement, free of his usual defensiveness, caught Ellie off guard. That was a long time ago, Tom. Yeah, he agreed quietly. Yeah, it was. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, I'm not trying to mess things up for you, I want to make sure Lily's okay in all this. That she's not going to get hurt if this guy's interest in Harborview, or in you, turns out to be temporary. For once, Ellie sensed real concern rather than jealousy in his words. I appreciate that. But I need you to trust that I'm putting Lily first, just like I always have. Tom nodded slowly. Fair enough. He gestured toward the couch, already made up with sheets and a blanket. I should turn in. Early start tomorrow if I'm going to make it back to Portland for my afternoon meeting. Good night, Tom, Ellie said, heading toward her bedroom. At the hallway, she paused. And thank you for giving Lily a good day. It meant a lot to her. Left alone in her room, Ellie touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of Daniel's kiss. Tomorrow would bring its own complications, the town council vote, Tom's departure, the continuing evolution of whatever was developing between her and Daniel. But for tonight, she allowed herself to simply feel happy, to believe that sometimes unexpected storms could lead to the most beautiful destinations. Harborview's town hall was a modest building of weathered brick and large windows built in the 1930s when the fishing industry had brought prosperity to the small coastal community. This morning, it was packed to capacity, every folding chair occupied and people standing along the walls. The preliminary vote on the Cape Harbor development had drawn the entire town, it seemed. Ellie slipped in 5 minutes before 10, scanning the crowded room. She spotted Daniel at the front, reviewing documents with members of his team. He looked up as if sensing her presence, his face brightening when their eyes met. With a subtle nod, he indicated an empty seat he'd apparently been saving in the second row. As she made her way to the seat, Ellie was acutely aware of curious glances and whispered comments. Word of her dinner with Daniel had clearly spread through Harborview's efficient grapevine. Frank from the diner gave her a knowing wink as she passed, while Marge Peterson raised an eyebrow so high it nearly disappeared into her hairline. Small towns and their gossip, Ellie thought with resignation as she settled into the chair. At least Lily was safely at school, spared the scrutiny that came with being at the center of Harborview's most interesting development, both literal and figurative, in years. Good morning, everyone, Mayor Grayson called, bringing the meeting to order. We have a full agenda today, but I know most of you are here for one item in particular. So let's begin with the preliminary vote on the Cape Harbor Eco Resort and Marine Research Center proposal. Daniel moved to the podium, his professional demeanor firmly in place, though Ellie noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders. Despite his confidence at the town meeting and his success with individual stakeholders, this vote was far from guaranteed. Before we proceed with the vote, Daniel began, I'd like to address some additional community benefits we're proposing based on feedback from residents. A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd. First, we're increasing the local hiring commitment from 60 to 75% for both construction and operational phases. Second, we're expanding the educational component of the Marine Research Center to include a youth scientist program. Daniel's gaze briefly found Ellie's. This program was inspired by a local student's innovative approach to microplastic filtration, technology that we believe could have global applications, particularly in developing regions. We want to nurture that kind of innovation and environmental stewardship in Harborview's young people. Pride swelled in Ellie's chest. He hadn't mentioned Lily by name, keeping it professional, but the acknowledgement of her daughter's work in such a public, meaningful way touched her deeply. Daniel continued outlining refinements to the proposal: additional environmental protections, expanded public access guarantees, increased community investment funds. Each adjustment addressed specific concerns raised by various community members, demonstrating how thoroughly he'd listened to local feedback. When he finished, Mayor Grayson opened the floor for final comments before the vote. Several residents spoke, including Pete Lawson, the fisherman whose support had shifted the mood at the town meeting. "I've spent 50 years on these waters," Pete said, his weathered voice carrying authority. "Seen plenty of developers come and go, most just wanting to exploit what we have here. But Mr. Reyes has done something different. He's listened, adjusted, respected what makes Harborview special." The old fisherman nodded firmly. "I say we give him a chance to prove his words with actions." More comments followed, some supportive, others still cautious. Frank surprised Ellie by standing up to speak. "I've been serving breakfast at Sandy's longer than most of you have lived here," he began, adjusting his glasses. "Seen businesses come and go, watched our young people leave for better opportunities elsewhere." He glanced at Ellie. "This project could change that pattern, create jobs that might keep families together, right here where they belong." With a gruff nod, he sat back down. Finally, Marge Peterson rose, the librarian's precise voice cutting through the murmurs. "As a member of the Lighthouse Trust, I was initially opposed to any development of Cape Ridge. It's a historical treasure, not a tourist attraction." She paused, adjusting her glasses. "However, Mr. Reyes has demonstrated exceptional commitment to preserving the lighthouse's heritage while making it more accessible to everyone. His plans for the library renovation are similarly thoughtful. I believe we should proceed with the preliminary approval." When the public comments concluded, the council members began their deliberation. Ellie found herself holding her breath as they discussed various aspects of the proposal: environmental impact, economic benefits, community safeguards. Daniel remained composed throughout, answering technical questions with clear expertise, but never appearing arrogant or dismissive. Finally, Mayor Grayson called for the vote. "All those in favor of granting preliminary approval to the Cape Harbor Eco Resort and Marine Research Center proposal, with the understanding that final approval will require completion of the environmental impact study and public comment period." 4 hands raised immediately. The 5th council member, Harold Jenkins, hesitated, his face troubled. An old-timer known for his resistance to any change in Harborview, Harold had been the most vocal critic of the development in previous discussions. "Harold?" the mayor prompted gently. The elderly man sighed deeply. "My grandfather was the lighthouse keeper at Cape Ridge," he said, his voice quavering slightly. "I grew up hearing his stories about guiding ships to safety during the worst storms. The thought of that place becoming part of some resort." He shook his head. Daniel leaned forward, respectful, but intent. "Mr. Jenkins, if I may, the lighthouse's history is precisely what we want to preserve and share. Your grandfather's stories, his legacy of service, those are treasures that shouldn't be lost to time. The museum component would be dedicated to capturing those very stories, preserving them for future generations." Harold studied Daniel for a long moment, seemingly looking for any sign of insincerity. And local children would learn about it? About the real history, not some sanitized tourist version? Absolutely, Daniel confirmed. In fact, we'd welcome your involvement in developing the historical exhibits. Your family's direct connection to Cape Ridge is exactly the kind of authentic history we want to honor. The old man nodded slowly, then raised his hand. I vote yes, with the condition that I have input on the lighthouse historical preservation. So noted, the mayor said, clearly relieved. The preliminary approval passes unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Reyes. The room erupted in applause, not universal but substantial enough to suggest genuine community support. Daniel accepted congratulations from the council members and his team, his professional composure maintained despite the significant victory. When he finally made his way to Ellie, his smile was both triumphant and slightly shy. We did it, he said quietly. First hurdle cleared. Congratulations, she replied, genuinely happy for him. That was quite the unanimous vote you pulled off. Couldn't have done it without the community connections, he admitted. People like you, helping me understand what matters to Harborview. Before Ellie could respond, they were surrounded by well-wishers and curious residents, all wanting a moment with the developer whose project had just taken a significant step forward. Daniel handled the attention gracefully, but Ellie noticed his gaze repeatedly finding hers across the crowd, as if drawing strength or reassurance from her presence. Eventually, the crowd began to disperse. Daniel excused himself from a conversation with the mayor and made his way back to Ellie. I have to meet with the project team to discuss next steps, he said, regret evident in his voice. But I'd love to celebrate properly later. Dinner tonight? I could come by around 7? Tom's leaving this afternoon, Ellie replied. So it'll just be Lily and me. Daniel's eyes warmed. Even better, I'll bring dessert, something chocolate for our young scientist. She'd love that, Ellie said, touched by his thoughtfulness. As they parted, Ellie felt a curious lightness in her step. The development project that she'd initially viewed with skepticism had evolved into something she genuinely supported, not just because of her feelings for Daniel, but because she believed it would benefit Harborview in ways the town desperately needed. Back home, she found Tom packing his small duffel bag, Lily helping by reorganizing everything he tried to put away. Dad says I can visit him in Portland, Lily announced as Ellie entered. He has a pool in his apartment building. That sounds fun, Ellie replied, trying to sound enthusiastic, despite the familiar worry that Tom would once again disappoint their daughter. When were you thinking, Tom? Maybe next weekend? He suggested, carefully avoiding overcommitment. I need to get settled first, but I was thinking Lily could come Friday after school, stay through Sunday, if that works for you both. The consideration in his tone, asking rather than demanding, was new, and Ellie appreciated it. We'll check the calendar, but that should be fine. Tom nodded, zipping his bag closed. How was the big vote? It passed unanimously, Ellie said. The project is moving forward, pending final environmental approvals. Congratulations, Tom offered, surprising her with what seemed like genuine goodwill. Daniel seems to have the whole town on his side. Not the whole town, Ellie corrected, but he's earned people's trust by really listening to their concerns. Tom studied her for a moment. He's earned your trust too, hasn't he? Ellie nodded, not bothering to downplay it. Yes, he has? Well, Tom said after a pause, he'd be a fool to mess that up. He hoisted his bag onto his shoulder. I should hit the road if I'm going to make Portland by 3. Lily threw her arms around him, clinging tight. Promise you'll call when you get there? Promise, kiddo. Tom hugged her back, then looked at Ellie over their daughter's head. Thanks for letting me crash here, and for... He hesitated. For raising such an amazing kid while I was busy figuring myself out. The simple acknowledgement, perhaps the first real recognition of his absence and its impact, caught Ellie off guard. You're welcome to visit any time, she found herself saying. Lily needs her dad. With a final hug for Lily and an awkward half-wave to Ellie, Tom departed. Through the window, they watched him load his bag into his car and drive away, Lily waving until he was out of sight. "Is Dad really going to live closer now?" Lily asked, her voice small. "It seems that way," Ellie answered carefully. "But remember, even when people have good intentions, sometimes their plans change. Let's just take it one visit at a time, okay?" Lily nodded, wise beyond her years after navigating the complexity of Tom's intermittent presence for most of her life. "Mr. Daniel doesn't change his plans," she observed. "He said he'd come to my science fair, and he did." "You're right," Ellie agreed, struck by the simple truth of her daughter's observation. "He keeps his promises." "Is he your boyfriend now?" Lily asked, her tone purely curious rather than teasing. Ellie felt her cheeks warm. "We're getting to know each other. He's coming for dinner tonight, actually." Lily's face lit up. "Can I show him my new ideas for the filter? I've been thinking about a pre-filter stage that could capture larger plastics before they break down." "I'm sure he'd love to hear all about it," Ellie assured her, marveling at how quickly Daniel had become someone Lily looked forward to seeing, someone she trusted with her ideas and enthusiasm. The rest of the day passed in comfortable routine, homework, housework, and preparation for dinner. Ellie found herself humming as she chopped vegetables for a stir-fry, a sense of anticipation warming her from within. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Daniel stood on the porch, a bouquet of wildflowers in one hand and a bakery box in the other. He'd changed from his business attire into casual clothes, jeans and a soft sweater that made him look both approachable and undeniably handsome. "For you," he said, offering the flowers, "and chocolate lava cakes for dessert." "My favorite!" Lily exclaimed, appearing behind Ellie. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess," Daniel replied with a wink. "Most brilliant scientists I know have excellent taste in desserts." Dinner was relaxed and joyful, filled with Lily's excited chatter about her filter improvements and Daniel's genuine interest in her ideas. When she finally went to bed, after extracting a promise from Daniel to look at her sketches in the morning, Ellie and Daniel settled on the porch swing with glasses of wine. "She's remarkable," Daniel said, gazing at the stars emerging in the clear night sky. "So much passion, so much potential." "She is," Ellie agreed. "And thank you for mentioning her project at the council meeting. It meant a lot to both of us." "I meant every word," he assured her. "The Youth Scientist program is something I've been considering for a while, but Lily's innovation made me realize how vital it is. Young minds see solutions adults miss because they're not constrained by conventional thinking." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, the gentle creak of the swing and the distant sound of waves creating a peaceful backdrop. "So what happens now?" Ellie asked finally. "With the project, I mean." "Environmental impact studies continue, final design refinements, more community meetings," Daniel replied. "It's a long process, probably 18 months before we break ground." "And you'll be traveling back and forth from Seattle all that time?" He turned to face her, his expression serious. "About that. I've been thinking. Horizon has offices in Portland and Seattle, but most of my work can be done remotely these days. I'm considering renting a place here in Harborview, at least for the next few months, to be closer to the project." "Just the project?" Ellie asked softly. Daniel's hand found hers in the darkness. "You know it's not just the project, Ellie. Meeting you and Lily, it changed something for me, made me realize what's been missing in my life." "And what's that?" she whispered, her heart racing. "Connection, belonging. The feeling I've had sitting at your kitchen table, watching Lily explain her ideas, walking with you on the beach." His voice was low, sincere. "I've built a successful company, but success doesn't mean much without someone to share it with." The simple honesty of his words touched something deep in Ellie's heart. "It's only been a week," she reminded him, though the objection sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I know," he acknowledged. "It sounds crazy, too fast, too intense. But sometimes you just know when something's right. He smiled slightly, echoing her words from the night before. I'm not asking for decisions or commitments, Ellie. Just time. Time to see where this might lead, to explore what we're both feeling. Ellie looked at their intertwined hands, then up at the man beside her. This unexpected gift the storm had quite literally blown into her life. A week ago, she'd been a waitress with deferred dreams, raising her daughter alone in a small coastal town. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I'd like that, she said simply. Time to see where this leads. Daniel's smile was like the sunrise, warm, bright, full of promise. As he leaned in to kiss her, Ellie felt the last of her reservations melting away. The future held no guarantees, but it held possibility, for her, for Lily, for Harborview, and for the man who had come to develop a resort and found something far more valuable in the process. Above them, the stars continued their ancient dance over the small coastal town, bearing witness to new beginnings born from chance encounters and open hearts. And in the little blue house with its peeling paint and warm kitchen, a family was taking shape. Not through obligation or convention, but through choice, respect, and the kind of love that builds slowly and surely like a lighthouse on solid ground designed to weather any storm. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.